Hi everyone. Tonight, we gently enter a place where each breath feels close to freezing before it leaves your lungs. You are standing in the muted blue light of a medieval winter evening. The kind of cold where your fingers begin to burn within moments, and your nose tingles as though the wind carries tiny needles. Snow sticks to your boots as you move along a narrow path between short timber houses. Thin strands of smoke curl from a few chimneys, though not enough to suggest real comfort. The reality is clear. If you lived here, survival would depend on learning the quiet, practical methods villagers rely on just to stay warm enough to see morning again. Before settling in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy the content, and share where you're watching from along with your local time. Now lower the lights. The cold settles on your shoulders like a heavy mantle as you step closer to the center of the village. You hear muted voices from inside the tight homes around you. Sound feels softened by the thick layer of snow, as if winter itself has decided that even noise must move carefully. A single dog bark cuts through the air, sharp and isolated, then disappears into silence. You catch the scent of damp wood, frozen earth, and a faint trace of smoke drifting from carefully guarded hearths. This is not the warm, glowing scene people often imagine. The fires here are small and strained, drawn from precious fuel that families must stretch across the entire season. A well-known historical truth comes to mind as you walk. Most medieval peasants endured winter inside homes with very little insulation. Timber frames packed with wattle and daub were common across much of Europe. While practical, these walls held only limited warmth. You rest your hand against one of them. It feels like touching a cold drum. The surface is light and porous, and you can sense the chill passing straight through without resistance. As your eyes adapt to the fading light, you notice villagers moving with a steady, almost resigned pace. They carry water, stack firewood, beat moisture from cloth, and call softly to one another with tired resolve. Everyone understands that if tasks are delayed, winter responds immediately. Small flakes land on your eyelashes and melt into icy drops. The sky has that dense, heavy look that suggests another storm waiting nearby. A lesser-known detail comes to mind, bringing a brief smile despite the cold. Some medieval villages believed that placing a carved wooden figure near the doorway could keep frost spirits from entering at night. Whether people truly believed this or simply found comfort in the idea, the figures remain beside several doors, their faces worn smooth by years of touch. You reach out and brush one with your fingers. The wood is icy, yet oddly calming. You continue forward as the last light fades. People rush to finish their work before darkness fully settles. A woman slams a shutter closed with a sharp sound. A young boy knocks snow from his boots before slipping inside. Around you, the village seems to fold inward, like a living thing preparing for a long, cold sleep. Windows glow faintly with firelight, flickering against frost-coated glass. The light wavers, as though the flames themselves are growing weary. Historians still debate whether this quiet evening rhythm came purely from necessity or from older traditions tied to seasonal belief. Some argue that village life was shaped by spiritual caution after sunset. Others maintain that people simply used every bit of daylight to avoid the cold. As the village grows still, both explanations feel equally real. In the Middle Ages, practicality and superstition often existed side by side. Your breath forms short, silver clouds as you move toward the center of the settlement. Snow crunches beneath your boots, echoing between the buildings. Roofs sag under heavy layers of ice, faintly sparkling in the rising moonlight. You notice the smell of hay drifting from a nearby barn where animals shift and breathe. Their body heat, limited as it is, becomes a valuable asset. Many families rely on livestock beneath their floors or beside their walls to raise the temperature just enough to endure the night. You stop and let the stillness settle. The silence feels old and substantial. In a world without engines, constant noise, or electric light, winter becomes more than a season. It becomes a presence. The cold acts like a force pressing into every space. You imagine trying to sleep here without modern comforts. Blankets are coarse. Firewood is limited. The best strategy is to keep moving, keep collecting fuel, and warm your hands with your breath while waiting for the night to loosen its hold. You notice that doorways seem lower than expected, roofs steeper, spaces more confined. Everything is designed to trap what little warmth can be preserved. Even so, a thin draft slips past your ankles, sharp and quiet. Another door closes nearby, and a gust of wind follows. Snow schemes along the ground like tiny silver insects crawling across the earth, biting at exposed skin. An elder passes you slowly, carrying a basket of broken planks. His beard is as white as the snow, his face shaped by decades of winters just like this one. He says nothing, only nods in calm acknowledgement. You return the gesture and watch him move on. Winter has influenced every motion of his body. He knows how to breathe without losing heat, how to bend without inviting cold into his joints, how to walk with efficiency learned through necessity. The low sounds of cattle carry faintly through the sharp air. Somewhere, a wooden cart creaks, the noise stretched and hollow in the frozen dusk. You breathe in deeply, tasting the metallic cold. It makes your teeth ache and stings behind your nose. You begin to wonder how people truly rest in this world. How do you sleep when the cold waits beside you? How do you relax when your breath remains visible, a constant reminder that the air beyond your blankets is barely above freezing? You take one last look around. From afar, the small village appears calm, even charming. But standing within it, you can feel the strain beneath the surface. Behind every door are families counting firewood, measuring food, and guarding warmth. Each home exists on the narrow edge between endurance and failure. And you stand there as though you are part of this place, breathing the same sharp air, feeling your joints stiffen, sensing your world narrow to the struggle between cold and shelter. The village grows quiet. One by one, shutters close for the night. A dog turns in a small circle before settling onto a heap of cold straw. A curtain is drawn across a window. The moon grows brighter overhead. You stop moving. You remain in the center of the frozen road, and winter meets your gaze with a calm, indifferent stare. The night is just beginning. Soon, you will enter one of these dark, modest homes and see how peasants endure the harshest season without the fireplaces you might expect. But for now, you pause. You listen. You breathe slowly. Your eyes adjust to the darkness. You follow a faint glow that pulls you forward. You approach a low doorway lit by a dull red light. As you bend and step inside, the cold outside eases its grip slightly. Not enough to feel warm, but enough for your shoulders to loosen. Your boots scrape across the packed dirt floor, uneven yet oddly reassuring. It feels like stepping directly onto the earth itself, solid but forgiving. These floors are not made for appearance. They exist for survival. Pressed down by countless footsteps, swept with bundled twigs, and packed again and again until they resemble a hardened surface. Your vision slowly adjusts. The interior is small, almost cave-like, with walls built from woven sticks coated in daub. When you touch them, the surface feels coarse and grainy. Small pieces of straw protrude from the dried clay like tiny fragments of bone. This construction is not unusual. Wattle and daub walls were widely used by medieval peasants because the materials were inexpensive, nearby, and easy to repair. They provided some insulation, though never enough to fully block winter from creeping inside. You hear the wind rattle faintly outside, but within this dim room, the sound fades into a distant, muted presence. The air carries the scent of damp soil, wool, and a trace of smoke clinging to clothing rather than burning openly. Your eyes settle on the hearth at the center of the room. It is little more than a shallow pit holding a few dull embers beneath ash. It barely qualifies as a fire. Still, the family treats it as something precious. Firewood is too scarce to waste through the night. Many households ration fuel so strictly that evening flames are allowed to fade into small glowing points by bedtime. You stand near the embers and feel only the slightest hint of warmth. As you crouch beside the hearth, a small, almost forgotten detail comes to mind. Some villagers believe that sprinkling dried herbs into the ashes before sleep invites a protective spirit to keep drafts away. Whether taken seriously or simply followed out of habit, a small clay pot of herbs sits beside the fire pit. It appears to have been used recently. You stand and look around. The house consists of a single room. There are no separate sleeping areas, No partitions, just one shared space where the family cooks, eats, works, and sleeps. The room hums softly as cooling wooden beams shift and crackle. The ceiling is so low you feel as though you could reach up and steady the rafters with your hands. Every detail of the structure is meant to preserve heat. Thick thatch above, mud and straw walls around. Yet even with all this effort, the cold remains a constant presence. You take a slow breath. The air tastes faintly metallic from dying embers and slightly sweet from dried hay stacked near the walls. As you slide your foot across the dirt floor again, you notice something unexpected. Beneath your heel, the ground retains a small amount of warmth. Before long, the reason becomes clear. Flat stones have been placed beneath the dirt near the hearth. These stones warm gradually during the day and release heat slowly through the night. Historians still debate whether this was intentional design or simply the result of years of cooking fires heating the ground. Some argue peasants deliberately used stones to trap heat. Others believe it happened naturally over time, without planning. Whatever the explanation, you feel the effect now, barely noticeable, but far better than frozen soil. You move farther into the room. The narrow windows are tightly shuttered. Even a small opening would invite a harsh draft. The shutters are made of thick planks, with scraps of cloth stuffed along the edges. You press your palm against one and feel a sharp chill pulse through the wood, as if the night itself is pressing back. The villagers respond with layers of defense, wool packed into cracks, dried moss pushed into seams, and mud smoothed over gaps in late autumn before the first frost arrives. You kneel beside a corner where a thin line of frost creeps along the wall. The cold always finds a way in. What matters is how carefully it is limited. Low ceilings prevent warm air from rising and escaping. Raised sleeping platforms near the center of the room capture the warmest air available. Thick straw is spread across the floor to separate bodies from the cold earth. This is not comfort. It is necessity shaped into structure. You sit on a low wooden stool, polished smooth by years of use. Your fingers follow shallow grooves carved into the surface, marks or letters worn down with time. They feel old, softened, and personal. You sense the steady persistence of generations. Each winter follows the same pattern. Layers of blankets. Walls repaired. Embers saved. Habits adjusted. Year after year, this house has stood, offering what protection it can. Your breath forms a faint cloud in the air. Even indoors, the temperature is likely just above freezing. Still, the difference from the outside feels significant. You pull your cloak closer. Your shoulders drop with a mix of fatigue and relief. Shelter does not mean warmth. Shelter means the cold reaches you more slowly, allowing rest if fortune allows. Across the room, a woman stirs a pot of thin broth, tapping a wooden spoon against the rim in a steady rhythm. She says nothing but glances toward you with tired, gentle eyes. Her children huddle near her feet beneath a shared wool blanket. You feel the quiet pull of that closeness, the comfort of shared warmth, the reassurance of breathing together within enclosed walls. Near the roof, bundles of drying plants hang like inverted bouquets. Some are onions, some herbs, others simple weeds gathered to fill gaps beneath blankets. In winter, everything serves a purpose. Nothing goes unused. Every object in this house carries the same quiet message. Survive this night, then the next, and the one after that, until spring finally returns. You step back toward the center of the room, letting your fingers graze the coarse wall. Its texture steadies you. You feel the chill, the grit, the quiet life held inside these materials. The house may lack comfort, but it contains something else. Endurance, silent resistance, a form of courage you can sense beneath your touch. The embers crackle again, as if releasing a breath. A child shifts beneath a blanket. A shutter creaks in the wind, and you realize this small enclosed space is where winter survival truly begins. You settle further into the dim interior, guided by the dull glow of the embers. The air feels heavy and still, slowing every movement. You watch the family prepare their sleeping space, and a clear truth emerges without words. Warmth here is not achieved alone. It is shared. You move closer to the center of the room, and the understanding settles around you like thick wool. To survive a medieval winter night, bodies press together, because the cold shows no mercy. You notice the bedding arranged in a tight cluster. Straw pallets cover the raised platform, layered with uneven stacks of blankets. The mother motions for the children to draw nearer, and they slide together easily, guided by habit. You begin to see how critical shared body heat is. Packed together, human bodies can warm a space more effectively than a weak fire ever could. As you sit nearby, an old truth surfaces. Many rural communities depended on group sleeping because their homes lost heat almost as quickly as they gained it. This practice was not sentimental. It was practical. You imagine lying between family members, half awake, listening to their breathing, feeling small shifts beneath the covers. It offers no privacy. It offers survival. You adjust your position, your shoulder brushing against a coarse wool blanket. The fabric scratches, carrying the faint scent of lanolin and smoke. The family dog circles twice, then curls up against the youngest child's feet. Even the warmth of a small animal becomes valuable as the night air turns colder. You notice the child's sleepy smile, comforted by familiar heat. A fragment of folklore crosses your mind, stories murmured by elders in distant villages. Some believed that placing a warm stone wrapped in cloth at the center of the bed invited protective spirits to watch over the sleepers. Whether taken literally or simply as comfort in the dark, you see stones warming beneath the hearth ash even now. Before the embers fade completely, someone will place them into the bedding. You look again at the walls. Thin cracks glint with faint frost as cold seeps in unnoticed. You pull your cloak tighter, copying the villagers' instinctive actions. No one needs reminders to bundle up. Winter teaches without gentleness. As you move closer to the sleeping platform, you observe how the father positions himself nearest the wall. His body blocks the strongest drafts, shielding the others. Those who tolerate cold better take the outer places. The more vulnerable remain inside. It is an unspoken system refined over generations. A thought occurs as you watch them settle. Some historians question how intentional these arrangements were. Were families consciously organizing themselves, or did these habits form naturally until they became unquestioned? Old texts offer only fragments, and interpretations vary. You lean toward the idea that it was both instinctive and functional. Humans often build order without deliberate planning. A fresh gust brushes the outer wall, making the shutters whistle softly. The villagers barely respond. They are already wrapped in their nightly formation. The children fall asleep first, breathing slow and even. The mother hums quietly while smoothing the blankets. Her voice blends with the creaking house and the muted sounds of animals beneath the floor. You watch the father push straw into a gap near the bedding, adjusting it with practiced movements. Straw may irritate the skin, but it traps warmth effectively. Its dry rustle adds a soft sound to the room, oddly reassuring. You run your fingers through a loose bundle, feeling the stiff strands settle like thin wooden threads. Your gaze lifts to the ceiling. Darkened beams stretch overhead, stained by years of smoke. Some areas shine slightly, polished by countless fires. In the low light, the beams seem to lean inward, as if sheltering the family below. They creak with each shift of wind, a built-in lullaby within the structure of the house. You begin to feel the room's weight, not fatigue, but a deep steadiness that comes from warmth earned through effort. Your breathing slows as you sit near the embers, their glow pulsing gently like the home's heartbeat. You lean slightly, resting against a post still warm from earlier cooking. The wood releases a faint heat that feels almost gentle. You close your eyes briefly and imagine the countless winter nights endured in this space. Nights filled with fear, resilience, small comforts, whispered jokes under blankets, and the certainty that another harsh day waits beyond dawn. Inside this single room, winter feels both smaller and larger. Smaller because it is faced together. Larger because it presses endlessly against the walls. You picture snow piling outside, wind sweeping across empty fields, the sky dense with silent stars. And yet here, only a few feet from that cold world, a cluster of bodies keeps warmth alive. You sense movement beside you as the father settles fully. The dog snores softly. The embers dim further. Night deepens and the lesson becomes clear. Winter cannot be faced alone. You lean into another person. You share breath, share blankets, and form a small knot of warmth that holds the darkness at bay. You look around once more, noting every detail: the wrapped stones, straw-packed walls, layered bedding, quiet breathing. Each piece fits together like parts of a simple, silent solution. And with each breath, you become part of the moment as well. This is how peasants endure their coldest nights. Close together, connected, sharing warmth through steady breathing, allowing their combined heat to turn a frozen world into a place where sleep can still rest on exhausted bodies. As you sit among them, you feel your own muscles relax, your breathing slow, your body easing in response to the quiet pull of the night. You shift slightly and let your eyes move toward the sleeping platform. The family has nearly finished arranging their resting space, and you step closer, drawn by curiosity to sense the textures of their nightly routine. From a distance, the bedding appears plain, but when you bend down and run your fingertips across it, you realize these materials carry long histories within their fibers. The base layer is a thick spread of straw laid over a wooden frame. When you press your hand into it, the surface answers with a dry, whispering sound. The straw bends, then springs back, sharp in places, yet supportive. It does a surprisingly good job of keeping bodies raised above the cold ground below. In many regions, people depended on this kind of pallet because softer bedding was simply too expensive. Old household records repeat this detail often, showing how common straw mattresses were among ordinary families. Straw alone, however, would be harsh against bare skin, so you notice a coarse linen sheet stretched tightly over the pallet. It is worn enough that the weave feels uneven beneath your fingers. The fabric carries a faint smell of smoke and crushed herbs, likely added to keep insects away. You lift one corner and see small pieces of straw clinging underneath. By modern standards, it is far from clean, yet it feels lived in, shaped by countless nights of shifting bodies and quiet dreams. As you study the bedding, a small detail crosses your mind. Many households replace their straw only a few times each year. By midwinter, the pallet often held the scent of the season, along with bits of debris brought in from the fields. The idea of crisp, spotless bedding belongs to a much later time. Here, usefulness matters more than comfort, and villagers accept a measure of itchiness in return for warmth. You straighten and look at the blankets layered on top. There are several, each with its own purpose. One is rough wool, thick enough to block out cold air if needed. Another is stitched together from worn tunics, a patchwork of faded colors sewn by hands that likely worked under candlelight. Beneath them lies a softer layer, probably filled with whatever materials were available. You breathe in lightly and catch a subtle trace of dried plants inside the stuffing. Some households tucked crushed leaves or lavender-like herbs into bedding to discourage pests, though whether this truly worked or simply offered reassurance is difficult to say. You suspect the latter, but the effort itself reflects a quiet ingenuity. As your fingers follow the edge of the patched blanket, you recall that in some medieval regions, mattress covers filled with feathers or wool were used when possible. Such comforts, however, rarely reached peasant homes. A few scattered records mention families saving feathers for years to make a single padded cover. You imagine the satisfaction someone might have felt after gathering enough for even a modest cushion. You glance at the family again. They settle onto the pallets without complaint. Their bodies sink into the uneven surface, adjusting naturally because this is what they have always known. You sit beside them for a moment, carefully lowering your weight onto the straw. It shifts with a soft crunch beneath you. Your hip finds a ridge, then a hollow, and finally a place that feels right. Even imperfect bedding can support you if you stop measuring it against the softness of your own time. You run your hand once more across a wool blanket. The texture is coarse, almost tugging at the skin, yet warmth is woven into every thread. Wool holds heat even when slightly damp, making it essential during winter nights. These blankets were valued nearly as much as clothing, and you can understand why. You pull a small corner over your hand, and warmth gathers beneath it almost immediately. Your thoughts drift to a curious detail from an old folktale. Some villagers believed that placing a small carved spindle beneath the pillow could keep bad dreams away. Whether this was superstition or simply a comforting custom, you notice a tiny spindle tucked near the bedding. It brings a quiet smile. Even in harsh conditions, people made space for small traces of magic. You shift again and let your hands slide along the wooden bed frame. Some edges are smooth, others rough, shaped not for beauty but for use. A few nails hold the structure together. In one corner, a rope supports the frame, pulled tight and creaking softly. Beds were not always carefully built. Many were assembled from leftover timber, repaired again, and finally abandoned only when they collapsed completely. A familiar question rises, one scholars still debate in various writings. Were these sleeping arrangements common across most peasant homes, or did they differ widely by region and resources? Some researchers argue that straw pallets were nearly universal, while others suggest certain communities used moss or even dried seaweed when straw was unavailable. The evidence is fragmented, leaving room for interpretation. There is something reassuring in that uncertainty. History often exists in the spaces between confirmed facts. You lean back, propping yourself slightly on your elbows, imagining what it would be like to sleep here night after night. You picture the faint rustle beneath you when you move. You imagine the slow buildup of warmth between layers of wool. You picture waking with bits of straw caught in your hair or impressions left by the uneven mattress. With each breath, this way of life becomes clearer. A child beside you shifts deeper under the blanket and releases a small, contented sigh. The sound softens the room. The embers glow faintly nearby. A light draft brushes your cheek. In that moment, it becomes clear that comfort here does not come from softness or luxury. It comes from familiarity, from shared blankets, from the quiet confidence of facing another cold night together. The bedding beneath you has supported countless nights already. You press your palm into the straw once more, feeling its firmness. You inhale its earthy scent. You listen to the gentle rustle as you move, and slowly the harshness of the bed fades. In its place settles a simple, steady calm, a reminder that even the most basic materials can support a tired body when the world outside is locked in frost. You sit upright again, letting the remaining warmth settle into your shoulders as your eyes drift toward the edges of the room. No matter how carefully the villagers prepare their home, the cold still presses in from every side. It slides across the floor like a slow, patient creature, slipping through spaces you would not expect. You shift your legs slightly, and a faint shiver runs up your spine as a ribbon of cold air brushes your ankle. You inhale calmly and examine the walls more carefully. The wooden beams groan softly as the night wind presses against the house. Between them sit panels of daub, repaired so many times that it is impossible to tell where the original surface ends and later fixes begin. The layers resemble overlapping scars, each one marking a fight against winter. You reach out and press a finger along one seam. Even through the dried mud, a quiet chill leaks inward. A familiar detail from village life comes to mind as you study the walls. Many rural homes had gaps between boards or around doors, and villagers filled them with whatever materials were available. Wool scraps, moss twisted into cords, clay pushed into cracks, even leftover pieces of cloth. It was an ongoing struggle because cold weather caused surfaces to split again and again. Tonight, you notice several fresh patches where the residents tried to seal drafts only hours before nightfall. A sudden gust shakes the shutters, causing one to knock lightly against its frame. The sound is sharp, like knuckles tapping wood. You tilt your head and spot a thin line of moonlight slipping through a barely visible split. It is no wider than a strand of hair, yet cold enough to send another small stream of air across the floor. You crouch by the window and feel it brush your fingertips. A curious memory surfaces. A bit of winter advice once shared quietly in farming households. People sometimes stuffed cracks with clumps of chewed bread, pressed into place as a temporary seal. It hardened quickly and could be replaced each day. Crude, but effective in its own way. As odd as it sounds, you would likely do the same if cold kept creeping in while your children tried to sleep. You stand again and look upward. The ceiling beams are darkened with years of smoke. Where the soot thins, you notice frost forming near the edges, like fine white lace spreading inward. When you lift your hand toward the roofline, you feel the cold pushing down, steady and silent. You imagine lying beneath these beams night after night, listening as they tighten and loosen with each shift in temperature. A question surfaces, one that researchers still debate when examining homes from this period. Were narrow doorways and low ceilings designed deliberately to reduce drafts? Or were they simply the result of limited tools and materials? The surviving buildings suggest both answers, leaving the truth open to interpretation. Standing in the center of the room, you sense how these tight proportions might help hold warmth, even if the builders never explained it that way. Your focus shifts to the door. Its planks are joined with wooden pegs, and the surface shows marks left by many winters of being forced open with numb hands. A strip of cloth has been pushed beneath it, blocking the gap at the threshold. When you slide your foot closer, the air turns noticeably colder, as if the night itself is breathing through the seam. The cloth quivers each time the wind rises outside. You step back toward the hearth and immediately feel the difference. Just a few feet separates bearable cold from deep, aching chill. It becomes clear why families gathered tightly around the fire earlier in the evening. Every draft feels like an unseen pressure against your skin, a reminder that no house can be sealed completely, no matter how carefully it is prepared. A sleeping child shifts beneath the blankets, pulling the wool higher over their shoulders. Near their feet, a loose strand of straw flutters in the breeze. The draft stays low, sliding along the floor like a wandering presence. It is not violent, only persistent, cold enough to make you blink and adjust whenever it passes. Without thinking, you draw your legs closer to your body. You cross to the far side of the room where the floor meets the outer wall. Here, the cold feels sharper. You squat down, breathe slowly, and watch your breath drift sideways, pushed by an invisible current. You imagine how villagers became skilled at noticing these signs. They learned where cold entered, which corners chilled first, and how to place bedding so children slept in the warmest areas. Your thoughts turn to the tools nearby. A small basket filled with rags, a wooden mallet, bundles of gathered moss. Everything kept close for quick fixes. Drafts were more than discomforts. They could be dangerous, especially during long nights when temperatures dropped without warning. People patched and repatched constantly, never trusting the house to protect them on its own. Outside, the wind rises briefly, moaning through the cracks like a lonely instrument. You feel the vibration travel through the beams and into the heart of the room. The family barely reacts. They know these sounds well. They have endured worse. Their calm does not mean the cold is harmless, only that fear wastes strength they cannot afford to lose. You take one final slow walk around the room, letting your hands brush the walls, the window frames, the door. Every surface tells a story of resistance against the season. You picture generations of hands pressing clay into gaps, stuffing cloth into seams, adjusting shutters, fighting stubborn cold with whatever materials they had. As you return to the center, a realization settles in. A medieval night is shaped not only by cold air or glowing embers, but by the constant negotiation between people and the drafts that challenge them. Every sealed crack, every patch, every adjustment is a small victory in a world determined to steal warmth. You sit again near the straw pallets. The cold moves along the floor, watchful but restrained. Above you, the beams settle with a quiet groan. Drafts whisper at the room's edges, searching for an opening. You sink into the moment, aware of how much effort it takes simply to sleep when winter presses against the walls. You remain still, listening to the faint creaks of the house, until another sound rises gently beneath your feet. A soft shifting, a warm snort, the rustle of hay. It takes a moment to recognize it, but once you do, the truth becomes clear. The warmth in this home does not come only from people. It also comes from the animals living directly below. You move toward the trapdoor at the far end of the room. It is little more than two boards joined by pegs, their surfaces smoothed by years of use. When you lift it slightly, a pocket of warm, earthy air rises toward you. The change in temperature is instant. You breathe in the smell of hay, animal musk, and damp wood, a mix that feels unexpectedly reassuring after so much cold, dry air. Many rural families built their living spaces above a barn-like area, allowing the heat from livestock to rise naturally. This setup was quite common. It was a practical choice made by people who understood that every bit of warmth counted. Cows, goats, and even pigs produced steady heat, far more dependable than a small hearth fire. You imagine the family upstairs silently appreciating the animals below, never needing to voice that gratitude. You lean closer to the opening and look down into the dim space. Moonlight slips through gaps in the outer wall, catching strands of hay that faintly glow like thin lines of gold. You hear a cow shifting her weight, her heavy body settling deeper into the straw. A goat chews slowly, unconcerned by the late hour. Their movements send slight vibrations through the floorboards, making the room above feel alive. An old belief surfaces in your mind as you watch. Some villagers once believed that sleeping above animals brought good fortune, that the creatures protected the household during winter nights. Whether people took this literally or simply found comfort in the presence of strong bodies below, the idea remains in stories passed down through generations. You smile slightly, understanding how such a belief could naturally grow from the relief of borrowed warmth. You lower the trapdoor and return to the center of the room. The floor now feels warmer, especially near the middle where the boards are thinnest. You kneel and press your palm against the wood. Heat rises upward, gentle but constant. It works as a surprisingly effective layer of insulation, a living furnace shaped by instinct rather than formal design. A question often raised by historians drifts through your thoughts. Did medieval families plan these split-level homes from the start, or did the practice develop gradually as people noticed the difference in temperature? The surviving records do not fully agree. Some sources describe intentional layouts, while others point to more improvised solutions. The truth likely sits somewhere in between, shaped by necessity, climate, and local tradition. You sit back and listen again. The steady breathing of animals blends with the softer sounds of the sleeping family above. Both worlds depend on each other. The animals rely on people for food and shelter. The people rely on animals for warmth and survival. In this shared winter space, the line between barn and home has almost disappeared. You picture the daily routine. In the morning, the father climbs down first, checks each animal, spreads fresh hay, and clears away waste before it builds up. As the animals begin to move, their heat rises steadily, warming the house from below like a hidden hearth. By late afternoon, enough warmth has gathered to push up through the planks, keeping the room above livable even as storms rage outside. It is a cycle older than memory. Curiosity leads you to press your ear lightly against the floor. You hear the slow chewing of cud, the scrape of a hoof against hay, the deep sigh of a resting animal settling in. These sounds become a kind of nighttime lullaby for the family above. You imagine a child waking in the dark, fear briefly tightening their chest, until a familiar grunt below reminds them they are not alone. The house seems to breathe with them. You stand and look around the room. The gentle warmth rising from below changes the entire atmosphere. Cold still clings to the walls and windows, but the center of the space holds a softness, a barrier against the frozen world outside. The floor creaks quietly beneath your weight, responding like a living surface stretched between two realms. Your fingers follow a crack between the boards. Even through this narrow gap, a stronger trace of warmth escapes, rising like a thin breath. You imagine how welcome that heat feels on nights when the wind scrapes the walls with icy persistence. You picture the family above, lying close together on their bedding, breathing slowly as animal warmth rises beneath them like an unseen blanket. You take another step and feel the air shift slightly. The heat is not enough to bring true comfort by modern standards, but it forms a protective layer. It holds the worst of winter at bay. Without the animals below, the house would likely freeze inside each night. Instead, the family has formed a relationship with their livestock that extends far beyond food and labor. You pause to recognize how ingenious this system truly is. No machinery, no fuel beyond hay and breath, yet it functions remarkably well, refined through centuries of observation and survival. You imagine the first person who noticed how much difference a warm body made on a cold night, and how that insight quietly spread from village to village. As the night deepens, the sounds below slow and soften. Warmth continues to rise, settling into the planks and walls. The family above sleeps calmly, protected by animals whose day will soon begin with milking, feeding, and work. You sense the rhythm of the house as a single living organism, sustained by the close bond between humans and animals. You take one last slow breath and let the warmth beneath your feet surround you. The cold still waits outside. But inside this small home, the shared heat of human and animal bodies creates a shelter strong enough to carry everyone through the long winter night. You pull your cloak tighter as your attention shifts to the family's clothing. Blankets help, and animal warmth helps even more. But you quickly understand that what people wear through the night is just as critical. In a world where fires burn out early and drafts slip in like thin blades, clothing becomes protection against the cold, even during sleep. You kneel beside a stack of garments folded near the bedding. The fabric appears heavy, almost rigid, but when you touch it, your fingers sink into dense wool. The surface feels slightly oily from lanolin, the natural wax in sheep's wool. It gives the cloth a faint earthy scent and helps repel moisture. It becomes clear why families rarely removed these layers during the coldest months. You imagine lying down still dressed in the same clothes worn throughout the day. You lift one shirt toward the dim light. The fibers are uneven, some thicker than others, clear signs of hands spinning with no expectation of perfect uniformity. Yet that uneven texture traps warmth effectively. Across Europe, villages depended on wool as their main winter fabric, and surviving records from old inventories. Heavy tunics, thick cloaks, and woolen underlayers are often mentioned in historical accounts, and now you can feel the reality of those descriptions in your own hands. Beside the tunic rests a pair of hose, repaired many times over. The patches differ in color, sewn with a steady hand that clearly prioritized usefulness over appearance. As you trace one seam with your fingers, you notice the raised edge where fabric overlaps. You picture someone seated near the fire earlier in the year, repairing this garment yet again, determined to stretch its life through another winter. Your thoughts drift to a small piece of folk belief once shared quietly in rural communities. Some people believed that placing an unwashed strip of wool over the chest at night protected the heart from cold spirits said to wander during midwinter. Whether this belief was widely trusted remains uncertain, but nearby you do notice a few small wool wraps placed near the bedding, sized perfectly to slip beneath a shirt. Your attention shifts to the corner where the father placed his outer cloak. It is heavy, thick, and far longer than anything meant for comfortable sleep. Still, many villagers slept wearing their cloaks, allowing warmth to collect beneath the layered folds. As your hand moves along the hem, you feel tiny burrs tangled in the fibers. This cloak has crossed fields, forests, and snow, collecting traces of the land along its path. As you study the garments more closely, a familiar question emerges, one that scholars still debate when examining medieval clothing. Were these layers largely consistent from one household to another, or did styles vary widely based on region, climate, and available materials? Some researchers argue that harsh winters forced clothing practices to become similar, while others point to archaeological evidence revealing notable regional differences. The material record offers no simple answer, leaving space for interpretation. Standing among these well-used garments, you gently lift a child's tunic that feels noticeably softer than the rest. It is lined with brushed wool, almost plush compared to the rough outer layers. Any extra softness was usually reserved for children. You imagine a mother carefully pulling this tunic over her sleeping child, trusting that the warmth will last through the night. Nearby, a basket holds mittens made from felted wool. In your hand, the felt feels dense and solid, a fabric designed to block wind almost completely. Felted wool was highly valued in midwinter because it trapped heat more effectively than woven cloth. You picture the family wearing these mittens even while sleeping, especially on the coldest nights, when frost crept along the inside of the windows. You look again toward the sleeping family. Each person lies beneath the blankets fully clothed, shirts tucked into hose, sleeves pulled low, cloaks draped loosely on top. Undressing during winter nights would have been unwise. Temperatures could fall suddenly, and even brief exposure could result in hours of deep, lingering cold. You bend closer and touch the fabric nearest to you. The wool has softened over years of use, shaped by heat, sweat, and countless nights of wear. It carries a faint scent of smoke, earth, and labor. This is the smell of endurance woven into every thread. The mother shifts slightly in her sleep, her cloak moving just enough to reveal a thick cord belt tied around her waist. Such belts were often worn even at night, partly to hold layers in place, and partly to keep small pouches or tools close at hand. You imagine the reassurance of sleeping with everything essential still within reach. A light draft brushes your cheek, reminding you how thin the boundary is between warmth and winter. Clothing here becomes a barrier, a protective wall built directly on the skin. Without these layers, the cold would quickly take hold. You reach for another item in the pile, a pair of thick socks made from coarse wool. The stitching appears rushed, the threads uneven, yet the fabric feels remarkably dense. You imagine someone wearing them while settling into a straw bed, warmth slowly spreading into their toes as frost silently forms along the far wall. You sit back, holding the socks for a moment. The fabric begins to warm slightly from your touch, responding almost immediately. In that moment, you understand why villagers placed such trust in these garments. Wool feels alive in winter, adjusting, breathing, holding heat. You look around once more as the room grows still. The blankets, layered clothing, cloaks, mittens, patched hose, and tunics softened by years of wear. Every item serves a purpose. Each one matters. As the cold presses against the cottage walls, a simple truth becomes clear. Clothing here is not about appearance. Clothing is protection. You rest your hand on the edge of the straw pallet and let your focus drift beyond the warmth gathered within this small cluster of bodies. The room itself begins its nightly transformation. As the embers fade and the last traces of daylight disappear, the cottage fills with a different kind of sound. Not loud or unsettling, but a quiet symphony that feels surprisingly familiar once you listen. The first sound comes from the wooden frame itself. Each beam releases a slow, rhythmic creak, timbers subtly contracting as the cold deepens outside. It resembles soft breathing, gentle groans that rise and fall without pattern. You listen more closely. Every board has its own tone, its own response to the night. Across medieval Europe, this nightly chorus of shifting wood was well known, often described in accounts of rural homes built from green timber that continued to move long after construction. Your eyes move toward the shuttered window. A faint whistle slips through an unseen gap, no louder than a breath. The sound trembles briefly, then fades as the wind shifts direction. You imagine lying half asleep, hearing that thin note weave through the room. It is not disturbing, merely present, a reminder that winter always presses near, invited or not. Above the rafters, you hear the flutter of a small creature, perhaps a bird adjusting in its nest or a mouse exploring the roof thatch. Rural homes often shared their nights with such quiet companions, and people accepted those small movements as part of daily life. Some folktales even claimed that mice crossing the beams foretold good fortune, though no one agrees on the origin of that belief. Another faint scratch echoes overhead, light enough to barely disturb the air. Behind you, the family's breathing adds its own steady rhythm. One child snores softly through a blocked nose. The father exhales in slow, deep breaths, the kind that follow long hours of labor in freezing weather. Their breathing blends with the quiet rustle of blankets and the soft movement of straw beneath them. If you close your eyes, it almost feels as if the entire house breathes alongside you, rising and falling in a shared rhythm. You pause when another sound reaches you. A faint metallic tick from a pot cooling beside the hearth. As the metal contracts with the falling temperature, it releases light, careful taps, similar to rain striking stone. You move closer to the hearth and sit cross-legged, watching the dim red glow beneath the ash. Even the embers make themselves known, crackling softly as the last warmth slips from the wood. These sounds mirror descriptions found in old winter journals, which speak of nights filled with gentle pops and the quiet settling of ash. You tilt your head as the wind outside suddenly strengthens, shaking the shutters with brief force. The sound rushes through the room like a sharp breath, then fades into a low background murmur. Scholars often debate how such nighttime wind shaped medieval sleep, especially during winter storms. Some suggest people became used to the constant noise and slept through it, while others believe it kept families half alert, always aware of changing weather. Listening now, both explanations seem possible. A stretch of silence follows, so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat. Then, without warning, the floor shivers with a soft thud from the animals below. A cow settling into straw. A goat shifting its weight. Their movements send slow vibrations through the wooden planks, like the steady pulse of a large creature sleeping beneath the house. The sound is gentle, not alarming. It feels grounding and oddly reassuring. You imagine villagers lying awake, quietly comforted by that familiar noise, knowing warmth still rose from below. Your focus returns to the roof. The layers of thatch soften and absorb sound, deepening the stillness of the room. Now and then, a small piece of ice slides down the outer surface and lands with a faint tap. You barely notice it at first until it repeats, each sound blending into the night's calm. You breathe slowly, letting your pace match the still air. Another quiet sound enters the space, a soft, steady drip. Meltwater from earlier snowfall travels along a beam, finds a narrow gap in the thatch, and drops into a clay pot placed beneath it. The sound is light, like fingertips brushing fabric. Many households kept pots beneath weak spots in the roof, aware that winter often tested even careful repairs. You touch the rim of the pot and feel a thin line of cold moisture beginning to form. As you remain still, all the sounds weave together into a single, gentle pattern. Wood expanding and settling. Wind slipping through narrow cracks. Straw shifting as sleepers move. Metal clicking softly. Animals breathing below. This is the soundscape of a medieval night. A world without engines or electrical hums, where every noise comes from living bodies, natural materials, or a house slowly responding to the cold after countless winters. You take another deep breath and let the sounds settle around you. Rather than feeling overwhelming, they form layers of calm. The room feels alive. Each sound signals that life continues, even as the outside world freezes into silence. You imagine lying there until sleep finally arrives, drifting through the darkness guided by this quiet chorus. In this small cottage, the night is never fully silent. It is gentle and steady, filled with a low hum of endurance. As you listen, your eyelids grow heavier, soothed by the simple rhythm of beams, wind, straw, breath, and shared warmth carrying people through the longest winter hours. You shift slightly and glance again at the dying embers, then toward the tightly closed window. A clear thought passes through your mind. This modest cottage is fortunate to still have even a few glowing coals. Many homes in poorer areas spent winter nights without any fire at all. The weight of that reality settles as you picture the world beyond these walls, where darkness presses close to families unable to spare even a small amount of wood to fight the cold. You move closer to the hearth and crouch beside it. The ash glows faintly, offering little warmth. You hold your hand near it, though calling it heat feels generous. It is more like the memory of warmth than warmth itself. The family here carefully manages their fuel, letting the fire burn strong only during cooking and early evening work. Once night arrives, the flames fade, because there is simply not enough wood to waste. You imagine another cottage nearby, owned by a family who failed to gather enough firewood before snowfall began. Perhaps the forest belongs to a landlord who limits access. Perhaps local rulers forbid peasants from cutting trees in certain areas, reserving resources for their own estates. Records from various feudal regions show how often firewood was taxed, restricted, or strictly controlled. You imagine living under such rules, where carrying an axe into the forest could result in punishment or fines. As your fingers sift gently through the ash, another detail comes to mind. People developed practical ways to preserve warmth when wood was scarce. Some burned dried peat or bundles of thin sticks collected secretly at night. Others used brushwood so fragile it produced more smoke than flame. Many allowed the fire to die early, saving even a small amount of fuel for morning cooking. You imagine waking to a cold so sharp it steals your breath, knowing the only way to warm the house again is to revive a spark hidden beneath the ashes. Near the hearth sits a small clay container with a rounded lid. When you lift it, faint traces of charred embers rest inside. This simple object served as a survival tool in certain regions, used to preserve coals overnight. When covered with ash, a few embers could stay alive for hours. At dawn, the family would blow gently on them, feeding the glow with dry twigs until a weak flame returned. Without this method, starting a new fire from nothing could waste precious time and fuel. Your gaze drifts to the far corner of the room, where shadows gather thickly. You imagine a night without even this faint warmth. The cold would bite at your fingers and cling to your lungs, making every breath feel sharp and heavy. You try to picture lying on a straw mattress in complete darkness while the cold settles into your joints, refusing to loosen its grip. You would still hear the familiar creak of wood, the muted sounds of animals below, and the steady sigh of the winter wind. Yet without even a single ember warming the space, those sounds would feel sharper and more invasive, as though the night itself were measuring your strength. This leads to a question historians often raise when studying life in rural communities. How frequently did families allow the fire to go out completely, not because of tradition or belief, but because they had no other choice? Some scholars argue that in the most severe regions, households regularly endured nights with no fire at all once winter reached its peak. Others maintain that families always preserved at least a faint ember, believing that the mental comfort of a small glow was just as important as its warmth. After standing in this room, you find yourself agreeing more with the latter view. Even the weakest light seems to alter the space in a way nothing else can. You move toward the door and rest your hand on its rough surface. Without a fire, the wood would feel as cold as stone. Even now, you sense the chill passing through it. A draft slips under the door again, brushing your ankles. You picture how quickly the cold would claim the room if the embers behind you faded into complete darkness. The floor would harden. The air would become dense and unmoving. Even breathing might feel uncomfortable. You step back toward the hearth and inhale deeply. The faint warmth touches your face briefly before disappearing. You can almost imagine how families gathered close when the fire went out. They wrapped themselves in every layer they owned. They pressed their hands into straw and set their feet against stones warmed earlier in the evening. They pulled children close, murmuring quiet words that clouded the air between them. You sit on the floor and let the ash run through your fingers again. The grains cling to your skin, cool and soft. Beneath them, a single ember glows like a resting eye. You blow gently. It brightens for a moment, then settles back into a dull orange. You feel a quiet connection to the countless hands that repeated this small act over generations. Simple gestures often determine the line between comfort and deep cold. A soft movement draws your attention. One of the children shifts beneath a blanket, finding a new position. They are warm enough for now, but you know how quickly that balance could change. Without a flame to renew the air, the house cools steadily. The floor stones lose their stored heat. The walls release what little warmth they held. The animals below move less as they fall into deeper sleep, sending fewer traces of heat upward. You stand and walk to the center of the room, observing how the cold advances. It behaves like a slow tide, beginning at the edges, sliding along walls, gathering at windows, and slipping beneath the door. It spreads through the floorboards, silent but persistent, until it reaches the beds, brushing cold across blankets and faces. Families without fire sensed this long before morning arrived. Still, even in the coldest homes, people adapted. They placed heated stones near their feet. They slept beside dogs for added warmth. They wrapped heads and hands in whatever cloth they owned. Some even breathed into their blankets, trapping small pockets of warm air beneath the fabric. You return to the hearth, letting the weak glow of the embers light your fingertips. A clear understanding settles in. For those living in the poorest cottages, survival meant learning to accept darkness without panic. They slept among shadows, wrapped in blankets scented with earth and smoke, relying on their own breath and the presence of others to replace the warmth the night denied them. You remain still for another moment, listening to the faint crackle beneath the ash. The ember pulses like a quiet heartbeat, and you sense the full weight of what it meant to endure winter without fire. The room softens as the glow blurs your vision, creating a gentle haze. Then your focus shifts to something less obvious but equally important. Before medieval families rested for the night, They followed small routines that shaped the feel of the room. These were not formal rituals or elaborate acts, but practical habits shaped by experience. You step toward the hearth again and notice how carefully the family prepared their space before sleep. Against the wall sits a pot of broth, now cooling. Earlier, the mother served the last warm portions to the children, leaving the remainder covered for the next morning's meal. Evening food was often sparse, but even a little warmth in the body helped ease the cold outside. Simple meals offered their own comfort, providing steadiness during long winter nights. Near the door, a broom of stiff twigs leans against the frame. Before lying down, someone swept the floor, pushing scraps toward a small pile by the wall. Many believed that sleeping in a messy room invited sickness or pests. Whether true or not, the habit was followed carefully. Order, even in small forms, offered reassurance in a world that often felt uncertain. On a low stool beside the hearth, several bundles of dried herbs are tied with twine. As you lean closer, their mild, sweet scent reaches you. These plants were gathered in warmer months. Some families placed herbs near beds to calm the mind or soften the smell of damp wool and smoke. You imagine a mother lightly brushing them over a blanket before covering her children, hoping the scent would help them rest. It becomes clear that herbs were rarely used for luxury. In many communities, they were valued for their believed healing or protective qualities. Rural texts describe winter mixtures meant to ease breathing, quiet nerves, or relieve lingering pain from daily labor. You inhale again. Perhaps this bundle contains mint or sage, both known for their soothing effects. You move toward a wooden basin near the wall. A small amount of water rests inside, dark and still in the low light. Before sleep, families often wash their hands and faces, not only for cleanliness, but to remove the dust and smoke of the day. The cold water stings your fingers. You picture villagers completing this task quickly, breath visible in the air, then drying their hands on coarse cloth before settling in for the night. Your attention moves to a different object, a short wooden stick, its tip darkened by fire. You lift it and recognize it as a tool used to sift through ashes. Many households stirred the hearth before sleeping, carefully arranging the remaining embers so they would endure through the night. You ease the stick into the ash, noticing the gentle resistance as it slides beneath the surface. This modest action preserved enough heat to reignite the fire by morning. A memory surfaces, recalling a familiar household belief. Some families thought that if the final ember faded before dawn, it signaled bad luck. Because of this, people took care to bury the embers securely, sometimes murmuring a brief wish or quiet thanks before covering it with ash. Whether this practice held spiritual meaning or was simply practical mattered little. It transformed an everyday chore into a subtle moment of connection with the home. You stand and drift back toward the bedding. Earlier, the mother had smoothed the blankets, ensuring they lay evenly. She positioned the children at the center of the sleeping area, closest to the warmth. You imagine her repeating this routine night after night, her hands moving automatically, shaped by years of winter habits. As the room rests in silence, a familiar question arises, one often explored by researchers studying domestic life. Did these nightly routines carry symbolic value, or were they purely functional? Some suggest such habits created an informal ritual that offered emotional comfort as night closed in. Others argue the actions were simply efficient responses to a harsh climate. Standing here, it feels likely that both views are valid. Ritual often emerges from necessity. Your gaze shifts once more to the door. Just before lying down, the father had pressed a cloth into the gap at the bottom, testing it with his foot to block any cold draft. The gesture feels quietly decisive. The house is prepared. The family can sleep. You return to the hearth and sit cross-legged. The ember glows faintly, pulsing like a slow, steady heartbeat. The sounds of rest begin to take over. A child breathes evenly. Someone adjusts beneath a blanket. The animals below stir briefly, then settle. Each sound blends with the routine's completed moments earlier. As you sit in the low light, the deeper purpose of these small actions becomes clearer. When winter nights are long and unforgiving, consistency becomes warmth. Repetition offers safety. Familiar movements push back the dark. You breathe calmly, letting the mild scent of herbs, the soft glow of embers, and the memory of the evening's quiet motions surround you like an unseen covering. These simple rituals, repeated day after day, soften a demanding world into one where sleep arrives without fear. The house seems to release a breath, the room grows still, the night deepens, and you settle into the steady rhythm of endurance. You shift again toward the center of the room, your eyes drawn to the smallest sleepers tucked tightly together. The children lie so close that they almost appear as one curled form, a small nest of limbs, wool, and gentle breathing. You step nearer, noticing how naturally they have gathered together as the night progressed. In a setting where warmth is limited, children quickly learn to share every bit they can. You crouch beside the pallet and observe how their bodies align. One lies on their side with knees drawn in. Another rests their forehead against the first child's shoulder. The youngest tucks their feet beneath the others, buried so deeply in layered blankets that only the crown of their hair is visible. You breathe in softly. The warmth rising from their cluster spreads through the air, subtle yet clear. A well-documented detail of rural life comes to mind as you watch. Families often place children at the very center of sleeping arrangements because smaller bodies lost heat more quickly. Surrounding them on all sides provided insulation that straw and blankets alone could not supply. It is a straightforward choice, noted repeatedly in descriptions of large communal beds across many regions. You lean closer and notice one child gripping a small scrap of wool. It appears to be a remnant from a larger cloth, now worn into a soft twist of fibers. Such items often served as comfort objects during long winter nights, when darkness felt overwhelming. You imagine small fingers holding it tightly as storms raged outside, grounding themselves in something familiar and warm. Near the children's heads rests a small cloth pouch. When you lift it carefully, a faint fragrance of dried flowers rises. Perhaps someone filled it with summer herbs months earlier. In many villages, people believed that placing scented herbs near sleeping children eased bad dreams or kept away cold-season spirits said to wander homes during the deepest nights. Whether or not these fears were taken literally, the pouch adds another layer of reassurance, a kind of emotional warmth alongside the physical. One child shifts slightly, releasing a soft murmur, caught between sleep and instinct. As they settle, a foot brushes against another blanket. You notice that the coverings near the children are thicker, patched with pieces from finer cloth. Parents often reserved the softest materials for younger sleepers, even if the adults endured rougher layers themselves. A quiet gesture of care in a season that required resilience. You sit beside the bed and rest your hand lightly on the edge of a blanket. It feels warm, almost alive, as though the children produce enough heat to resist the cold through persistence alone. You can sense the straw beneath shifting gently each time a child breathes deeply or adjusts position. Your thoughts return to a question historians frequently consider when examining old household records. How did families decide sleeping positions when space was scarce? Some argue arrangements followed strict rules based on age and vulnerability. Others believe the choices shifted nightly, influenced by illness, fatigue, or emotional need. The surviving accounts offer few clear answers, leaving much unsaid. Watching the scene now, it seems the decisions require no discussion, guided more by instinct and care than by formal rules. You glance toward the mother, sleeping only a short distance away. Her hand rests near the edge of the children's blankets, close enough to reach them if necessary. Even in sleep, her body angles subtly toward them, as if aware of every small movement. You imagine her waking instantly if one child stirred or cried out in the darkness. In a time before heated rooms or bright lamps, keeping children warm and safe was a constant task, part instinct, part vigilance. A small sound rises from beneath the blankets. One child hiccups softly in sleep, curling closer to a sibling. You imagine how many nights throughout history echoed with such tiny noises. The soft whimper of a dream, the rustle of straw, the creak of wooden boards beneath shifting knees. These sounds belong to a cold world, but also a tender one. You adjust your position, scanning the room. The warmth surrounding the children stands in sharp contrast to the chill pooling near the walls. You can almost see the cold gathering in corners like a quiet shadow, waiting for a chance to creep closer. Yet the children's nest holds it at bay, forming its own protective circle. You stretch a hand toward the nearest child, stopping just short of touching the blanket, and feel the heat radiating upward. It evokes images of small animals huddled in burrows, surviving long, harsh nights. Medieval illustrations of families sleeping closely together come to mind, and you realize those images were literal, not symbolic. Small details emerge: a child's hair damp with warm breath, another's sock peeking from the covers, edges darkened by sweat. These hints remind you how the human body fights the cold even in rest, making the scene feel intimate and immediate, as if you can sense the gentle rise and fall of their chests. A fragment of rural childhood lore surfaces. In some villages, people believed that if a child slept with a smooth stone warmed by the hearth, it would protect their spirit during dreams. Whether metaphorical or literal, this belief appears in scattered accounts. Glancing near the bedding, you notice exactly such a stone tucked in a cloth pouch. Someone here clearly blends practicality with gentle superstition. You listen again. The children's quiet breathing mixes with occasional timber groans and soft murmurs from animals below, forming a steady nighttime rhythm. You imagine them growing up with this soundtrack, so familiar that silence might feel strange. Your gaze drifts over their bundled forms. Faces are close, blankets overlap, feet tangle. Their sleep is not neat or orderly. It is tangled, warm, and entirely practical. In the depth of winter, closeness is comfort. Closeness is survival. You settle back onto your heels, letting the warmth wash over you. The children do not understand the night's vulnerability. They simply trust their nest, their parents, and the blankets to hold them until morning's first light. Watching their slow, even breathing, you recognize a simple, profound truth. When the world is coldest, the smallest sleepers rely not on walls or fire, but on each other. Here, their shared warmth quietly triumphs over the darkness. You ease away from the children and move to the room's opposite end, where the blankets are arranged differently. This bedding is wider, flatter, almost expectant. The space is larger than needed tonight, carrying its own quiet story, rooted in medieval household routines. You kneel beside it, touching the straw. It crunches softly, familiar yet symbolic. Nights existed when travelers arrived unexpectedly, seeking shelter before the cold claimed them. Inns were rare and costly, so families shared their warmth without hesitation. You imagine a knock at the door long after sunset. A weary traveler enters, face red from wind, clothes stiff with frost, greeting with a trembling voice. Historical accounts show that hospitality was often a necessity, not choice. Any traveler might one day be a neighbor in need. Sharing the room meant sharing survival. Running your hand over the bedding, you note the rougher fabric. These are not the soft layers reserved for family, but communal bedding, worn yet ready. Surviving records indicate these blankets were patched from scraps, for visitors, hired workers, or wandering merchants. A faint scent lingers: smoke, leather, sweat, a trace of dried horsehair from some winter journey long ago. Every fabric piece carries memories of strangers who slept here, listening to the same timber creaks and animal murmurs. A piece of folklore comes to mind. In some rural communities, sharing a bed with a traveler brought good fortune, the warmth of new stories softening the awkwardness of lying elbow to elbow with strangers. Nights of shared bedding demanded adjustment. Family members shifted closer to walls or rearranged themselves so the visitor could occupy the warmest spot. It was not luxury, but practical compassion. A question arises, one scholars consider when studying medieval travel customs. Did visitors always sleep among the family, or were separate lofts or corner beds sometimes used? Accounts vary. Some regions describe communal sleeping, others mention modest dividers of cloth or wood. The truth depended on resources, climate, and local tradition. Looking around this small cottage, you sense privacy was a luxury no one expected. A guest would share everything: warmth, drafts, night sounds, the children's gentle breathing, even the faint sweetness of herbs hanging near the rafters. You imagine lying among strangers, elbows brushing, blankets overlapping, breaths mingling in the cold air. Yet in this setting, such closeness feels unexpectedly comforting. Your fingers trace the edge of the bed frame. The wood bears small dents, likely from repeated bumps as people climbed in and out. You picture late arrivals slipping in quietly, careful not to disturb the household, though inevitably someone shifts and mutters half asleep. Perhaps the visitor whispers a quiet thanks. Perhaps the host murmurs a soft welcome. These brief exchanges capture the essence of winter hospitality. Your hand moves over a straw-filled bundle, the pillow crackling softly. In peasant homes, pillows were often improvised from available materials. Families might give the flattest pillow to guests, keeping the slightly softer ones for their children, a practical arrangement. Guests received shelter and rest, while children remained warm and comfortable. Simple, fair, and effective. You picture a traveler, exhausted from icy roads, boots damp from slush or snow. Maybe they bring news from distant villages, or share a story in exchange for a warm corner. Storytelling often served as currency when money was scarce. You imagine voices in the dark recounting markets, storms, or journeys while the family listens drowsily. You glance around the room. The extra bedding feels like an open invitation, a silent promise that anyone caught in the cold could find warmth here. Hospitality was not optional in medieval life. It was a shared defense against a season indifferent to names or boundaries. A goat shifts in its sleep beneath your feet, the vibration reaching the pallet beside you. A sleeping visitor might have smiled faintly at the comfort of lying above warm bodies instead of on a frozen road. Your hand drifts again across the blanket. It carries traces of countless nights like this, each one layered into its fabric, the multicolored patches, uneven stitches, stretched corners. Every mark tells the story of winters when warmth was shared out of necessity. A quiet truth settles. When cold was relentless, sleeping arrangements became flexible, expanding and contracting like breath. A family might plan a peaceful night only to find themselves sharing blankets with a stranger. Yet instead of resentment, this closeness often sparked gratitude or humor, connecting lives that might otherwise remain separate. You press your palm to the straw again. It feels firm, slightly uneven, yet welcoming. You imagine lying beside a stranger, nights stretching long and cold, realizing that warmth sometimes comes from unexpected companionship. In a world where winter presses hard against the walls, comfort arrives through shared space, shared breath, and shared survival. In this small room, every corner tells a story, and even a stranger becomes part of the rhythm that sustains warmth and keeps the darkness at bay. Rising from the pallet, your gaze drifts to the shuttered window. A faint silver glow seeps through the edges. Dawn is approaching. But in a medieval winter, dawn brings no warmth or color, only a quiet chill that settles over everything like a second skin. You step toward the door, and the cold brushes your face sharply. The room has grown cooler, even though the family sleeps just a few feet away. The ember beneath the ash has dimmed to a tiny red, no brighter than a resting animal's eye. You crouch beside it, feeling almost no heat. This was a familiar morning scene for many households, breath fogging fingers, stiff skin tingling, as if the cold gently pulled them from sleep. Frost gathers along the hearth, crystals sparkling in delicate patterns formed during the long darkness. You blow softly on one, watching it melt into a droplet. Old records note that villagers often woke to frost on their blankets, especially near walls, where breath would freeze lightly, leaving a silver dusting. You move toward the window, palm hovering near the shutter. The cold strikes sharply, as if a fist of icy air waits outside. The air inside remains biting, but near the window feels like a portal to another world. Legends surface in your mind. Some families believed frost creeping inside during early hours signaled the presence of winter giants pressing the cold deeper into the earth. Whether believed or told for children, the image fits the shimmering frost. Looking back at the sleeping family, their breaths rise and fall beneath the blankets. As the room cools, bodies curl tighter. The mother shifts slightly, pulling covers higher to shield the children from the creeping chill. You can almost hear wool and straw adjusting under their weight. Scholars debate how families tolerated such mornings without constant illness. Some suggest repeated exposure strengthened resilience, Others argue sickness was more common than records show. Likely, the truth lies in between. Standing there, feeling the cold reach your sleeves, you grasp the resilience required just to face a winter morning. You step toward the door. A thread of cold air slips underneath, moving silently across the floor like a thin stream. Strands of straw tremble, reminding you that winter never sleeps. Your fingers trace the floor, noting how the cold clings to low spaces before rising to the bedding. You straighten and inhale. The air tastes crisp, almost metallic, as winter mornings always do before any fire brightens the world. You imagine waking in this chill, pulling yourself from the blankets, joints stiff as the beams overhead. You step into the same cold that filled the room through the night, but now it feels sharper, stripped of the warmth once shared. Your gaze drifts upward to the ceiling beams. A thin layer of frost clings where the wood meets the roof, like scattered stars faintly glowing in the dim light. You reach out and touch a beam. The wood is icy, numbing your fingertips almost immediately. Pulling back, you flex your fingers, warming them with your breath. Below, the animals stir with more frequency. A soft grunt rises from the lower level, followed by the shuffle of hooves through the hay. Their warmth feels faint, still sluggish from sleep, not yet generating the full heat that will warm the boards. Their movements create a quiet rhythm, a subtle signal that dawn is arriving before the light fully illuminates the room. You return to the sleeping platform, watching the blankets rise with each breath. Lifting a small corner, you feel a warmer pocket beneath, a tiny refuge amid the cold. Still, the chill creeps inward slowly, inch by inch, as hours pass. You imagine the family waking soon, their first breaths forming clouds in the cold air, their first words dropping into the chill. They shake frost from blankets, rub their hands together, and move instinctively toward the hearth, coaxing the ember back to life. Everything begins with that ember. Without it, starting the day would be far harder. Back at the hearth, you stir the ash lightly. A faint glow responds. You blow gently, deepening the color. The ember pulses once and then settles. You picture repeating this simple morning ritual each winter, the ember as a spark of hope. When it awakens, so does the family. Sitting on a stool, you let the cold fold around you like a thin cloak. Dawn seeps into the room with a ghostly, pale softness. It brings no heat but carries the promise of movement, chores, daily routines, the gentle push that banishes the stillness of night. Cold lingers longer in a medieval dawn than one might expect. It reaches every corner, touches each breath, announcing itself before any other sensation. Yet within this cottage, surrounded by animals stirring and sleepers shifting, you sense something quietly profound. Morning cold is not an enemy. It is simply the next chapter in a rhythm that will continue until spring finally returns. Watching the pale light creep across the floor, you recall another truth. Medieval nights were long, winters even longer, and families rarely slept in a single uninterrupted stretch as many do today. Sleep came in two waves. This pattern was ordinary to them, a natural rhythm of the season. You rise slowly and move toward the center of the room. The family still sleeps deeply, but if you lived here, you might already have woken once. Night stillness often faded after a few hours, replaced by soft wakefulness. People stirred, whispered, prayed, tended the fire, checked animals, or lay awake in the dark, letting thoughts drift. You imagine lying on a straw pallet, eyes half open, listening to the darkness hum with its midwinter pulse. Another step, and a floorboard creaks under your weight, a sound suddenly sharp against gentle breathing. Villagers might wake at the same noise, acknowledging it for a moment before returning to the space between sleep and waking. Written accounts from later centuries note that the first sleep ended a few hours after dusk, followed by a brief period of quiet activity before the second sleep. This pattern stretches back farther than most realize. You approach the window as a thin thread of dawn brightens. The cold bites here, reminding you that the hours between sleeps were spent carefully, with awareness of temperature. You press your hand against the shutter, feeling the lingering grip of night. Yet something in the air hints at change, not warmth, but possibility. You take a slow breath, imagining the patterns that shaped entire lives. A faint childhood tale drifts in. Some parents claimed that waking in the night was a gift from protective spirits, prompting households to check the fire or ensure warmth. Whether believed or not, such stories framed night awakenings as comforting, normal, and expected. Sitting beside the bedding, you watch the children. Their bodies rise and fall steadily. Following the old pattern, they might stir during the night, mumble softly, curl together, and slip back into their second sleep without fully noticing. Tiny voices might whisper for water or warmth, before returning to dreams flickering with shadow. Your attention shifts to the hearth. You crouch beside the ash. A faint ember glows, pulsing with the last of its strength. Lightly coaxing it with a stick, you imagine someone centuries ago doing the same after their first sleep. Checking embers was a quiet habit, a moment when the room felt alive, breathing slowly. You blow gently. The ember brightens briefly, then dims. You picture the family doing this regularly, soft breaths filling the dark. These small, repeated acts shaped winter nights as much as the cold itself. The time between sleeps could last minutes or over an hour. People prayed, told stories, tended tools, or simply lay in silence while the world outside remained still and icy. A question lingers. One researchers continue to examine. Was segmented sleep universal, or did it vary with climate and routine? Evidence suggests it was common in regions with long winters, but some argue it depended on work schedules and access to heat. The surviving accounts offer no single, definitive answer. Yet here, in this dim cottage, the pattern of night feels almost inevitable. You stretch your arms slowly, feeling the cold tug at your muscles. You picture yourself on the straw bed, eyes opening in the middle of the night, the darkness thick and quiet around you. Perhaps you listen to the wind outside, counting the hours until dawn. Perhaps you pull the blanket closer or murmur to someone beside you. Or maybe you simply gaze at the faint red glow of the ember, letting your thoughts drift like smoke. You move deliberately through the room, noticing the objects shaped by nightly rhythms. The clay pot by the hearth waits to be refilled. The small knife by the wall stands ready for morning tasks. Herbs hang from the rafters, intended to calm breath and encourage steady dreams. These objects exist in the quiet space between sleeps, part of a world that briefly wakes only to return to rest. Kneeling near the children, you touch the blanket lightly. Their warmth rises through the cloth, a quiet reminder that, even in segmented sleep, the room center is anchored by shared heat. They do not consciously know the rhythm their bodies follow. Yet the long winter nights teach it, shaping the body's natural cycle. You tilt your head and listen. A faint rustle comes from the animals below, movements growing as dawn approaches. Families might use this first waking period to check the animals, ensuring none are tangled in straw or rope. The sound of shifting hooves becomes a signal. The night still has hours left, but the world remains steady. Another subtle noise reaches you. A sleeper exhales, a low murmur rolling on the palate. This reminds you that the second sleep is often deeper, more anchored. Once the small tasks or quiet reflections between sleeps are completed, people return to rest with renewed calm. Walking to the far side of the room, you glance at the rafters. Frost glimmers along the beams as the sky outside lightens. You imagine lying here during the second sleep, unaware of the cold above, wrapped in the warmth of shared blankets and steady breaths. You return to the hearth and sit again. The embers glow dims, signaling that the morning fire ritual is near. Closing your eyes, you picture drifting into the second, deeper sleep, the world narrowing to the sound of breath, the softness of straw, and the scent of herbs. Segmented sleep is natural here. It is shaped by long nights, cold, and the rhythms of life inside humble walls. You let this understanding settle like a slow exhale. First sleep, a waking pause, second sleep. Winter guides people toward rest. In this cottage, night is not a single stretch but two gentle waves carrying the family from dusk to dawn. Their habits, breath, and shared warmth shape the night just as surely as the frost shapes the earth. Sitting by the hearth, you feel the embers pulse like a sleepy heartbeat and sense the next phase of the night unfolding. Had you been born into this world, the interval between first and second sleep would not be idle. It is a quiet window where thoughts stir, tasks resurface, and small responsibilities tug at attention. Rising slowly, the cold floor beneath your feet reminds you why this midwinter pause became its own little world. You step toward the hearth and stir the ash. The ember flickers faintly, barely lighting the edge of your hand. Families often tended the fire during this interval, ensuring it survived until morning. Its tiny glow could shorten the chill of dawn and save time that would otherwise be spent igniting a new flame. Old diaries note how people adjusted ash and charcoal with practiced motions during this in-between period. You picture yourself kneeling close, breath fogging in the cold. There is something intimate about this moment. Shadows move like thick curtains. The ember glows softly, the only color in a gray and black room. You push a thin kindling into the ash, not to start a new flame, but to sustain the old one a little longer. A faint creak sounds above. Rafters contract as the temperature dips, a gentle reminder that the night is not finished. You look at the sleeping family. The mother shifts, reaching instinctively toward the children, feeling their warmth even while half asleep. A small memory surfaces. In some regions, people believed children's spirits wandered between first and second sleep. Parents sometimes whispered rhymes or prayers to keep them near. Whether literal or symbolic, these stories offered comfort during long winter nights. You imagine a parent murmuring softly, words blending with straw rustling under their hand. You move toward the wall where tools rest. A wooden spindle, a bone-handled needle, a small curved knife. Tasks from the day linger, waiting for this quiet time. Many households use the interval between sleeps to complete chores requiring patience and focus, mending clothes, sharpening tools, preparing herbs. These tasks demanded no bright light, only familiarity and steady hands, shaped over countless nights. You pick up the spindle. Its surface is smooth from years of handling. You imagine someone turning loose wool into thread while half awake, guided by muscle memory. Long winter nights offered more hours of darkness than work alone could fill. Households developed practical ways to use this period between sleeps. Your thoughts drift to a familiar question in historical discussions. Did this mid-sleep interval serve primarily practical needs, or was it a time for reflection, prayer, or quiet conversation? Surviving writings suggest it was a mix of both. Some families treated the interval as a pause for stillness, sharing whispered hopes, fears, or small daily thoughts. Others used the time to check on animals or stir pots left near the dying fire. The evidence shows a varied picture, shaped by region, habit, and circumstance. You set the spindle aside and approach the trap door leading to the animals. Lifting it a few inches, you peer into the dim space below. Warm air rises gently to meet you. A cow shifts quietly in sleep. A goat emits a soft snort. Their movements follow their own nightly rhythm, separate yet intertwined with the household. Some families used this waking interval to tend livestock, especially during harsh weeks when illness or injury could appear suddenly. Then a shift stirs in the air, subtle at first, a vibration beneath the floorboards, spreading through beams and walls. A storm builds outside, a deep winter tempest, capable of swallowing villages in white silence. You rise and approach the window. Every sleeper in this cottage depends on more than blankets and dreams tonight. They depend on each other. Your palm touches the shutter, the wood trembles faintly. Outside, wind presses against the house with steady force. You sense its vastness and understand why villagers often sought larger groups during blizzards. Stepping back, you picture neighbors gathering under one roof when snow buries doors. Shared warmth from bodies creates more life, more resistance to the cold. You walk to a corner with an extra stack of straw. It feels dry, brittle, faintly sweet, a reserve to bring toward the center if the storm intensifies. The floor could be covered with straw, forming a communal bed. In some stories, families even pulled animals close, letting goats or lambs sleep against human warmth. The cottage transforms into shared shelter against a frozen world. A memory from folklore comes to mind. Villagers believed winter storms were caused by giants sweeping across the sky in snow-covered cloaks, searching for lonely houses. To survive, people gathered together, ensuring no one slept alone. Whether or not the tale was literal, extra bodies offered safety on harsh nights. You sit by the hearth again as the walls grow quiet. The ember glows faintly, a reminder that warmth persists even when the world outside seems merciless. You stir the ash gently. Sparks blink like tiny stars before fading. You imagine the family waking if the storm intensifies. You stir from a light sleep, reaching to add extra blankets. Bodies shift closer together, sharing warmth until the cold feels less threatening. Your gaze lifts to the rafters. Dust drifts down as the wind presses snow against the roof. The thatch softens the sound, turning it into a quiet hum, like distant waves on a frozen shore. You tilt your head and listen. The storm's rhythm is deep and muted, a steady push and pull that fills the pauses between breaths. For a moment, the cottage feels suspended in a cocoon of sound, floating within a white, swirling world. You move toward the trapdoor and lift it slightly. Warm air rises to meet your face. Below, the animals shift more frequently, sensing the storm long before humans. Their movements are tense but patterned. You picture villagers climbing down to check on them, stroking a cow's flank or tightening a rope around a restless goat. During storms, the animals' warmth is precious. Their bodies can mean the difference between a comfortable night and a dangerous one. You close the trapdoor gently and stand again. Through the floorboards, you feel the storm differently now, not as cold, but as a vibration, a steady heartbeat of winter pressing against the home. You walk to the center of the room, drawn by the shared warmth rising from the bedding. Even in sleep, the family's heat spreads outward like a gentle tide. A question arises, one that historians often explore. Did harsh storms cause more people to share a single sleeping space, or did families simply adapt the arrangement they already had? Evidence suggests both. In some regions, neighbors braved snow-choked paths to shelter together. In others, families stayed home, rearranging bedding to cluster so tightly that no heat escaped. You place your hand on the pallet and feel warmth pooling beneath your palm. You imagine 5, 6, or even 10 people sharing the space during a storm. Straw would flatten. Blankets would weigh heavy with breath. The air would smell of wool smoke and shared heat. Uncomfortable, perhaps, but life-saving. Outside, the storm grows stronger. Low rumbles roll across the sky. Snow strikes the roof in a pattering that grows steady and loud. You close your eyes, letting the sound wash over you. It is not frightening, it is powerful. It reminds you how small a single cottage is against winter's sweeping force. Leaning against the wall, you feel the cold pressing through the wood. The contrast between outside chill and indoor warmth is striking, as though you stand at the edge of two worlds. And a simple truth becomes clear: survival depends on togetherness. Warmth increases when bodies gather. Fear diminishes when voices murmur in the dark. Storms feel smaller when shared. You return to the bedding, watching the family breathe in unison. Outside, the storm presses harder, yet inside the warmth holds. Blankets glow softly. Straw rustles. A child sighs in sleep. The air carries a faint scent of herbs and wool. You kneel, resting your hand lightly on the blankets. The heat beneath your palm feels stronger now, as if the approaching storm draws the family closer, even in sleep. You imagine neighbors arriving soon, knocking softly for shelter. You picture the bedding expanding, bodies pressing tighter, the room filling with whispers and tired smiles as everyone settles for the long, cold night. Listening to the storm swirl outside, you understand a truth that shaped countless winters. When the world turned white and silent, people survived by becoming each other's warmth. In this little cottage, the storm may be vast, but inside, human closeness burns softly and steadily, refusing to yield. You remain crouched near the bedding for a moment, letting the storm's deep hum settle into your bones. Then a faint, earthy aroma drifts through the air, pulling your attention to a small wooden shelf by the hearth. You rise and walk toward it, drawn by the quiet promise of the dried leaves and roots. In a world without steady warmth or full bellies, these simple plants often shaped how people eased themselves into sleep. You lift one bundle carefully. The leaves crumble slightly, releasing a scent of warm soil and summer sun. People had collected these months earlier, tying them with twine and hanging them near the rafters to dry. Even now, the faint fragrance offers comfort, a whisper of warmer days lingering in winter. You inhale slowly. The aroma is mild, grassy, and soothing, like mint or chamomile. Old household notes describe villagers using such infusions to calm nerves or settle the stomach before sleep. These were not elaborate remedies, but everyday comforts passed through generations. You set the bundle aside and pick up another. This one smells sharper, like dried stems with a hint of resin. Sometimes these herbs were burned in small amounts, letting smoke drift through the room to chase dampness or ease chest tightness after hours of cold air. You imagine the curl of smoke rising alongside the soft glow of embers. A memory surfaces. In some regions, dried fennel or lavender-like flowers were placed under pillows to encourage peaceful dreams or ease nighttime worries. Whether effective or not, these gestures provided reassurance when winter pressed against every wall. You set the bundle down and notice a small clay cup on the hearth. Dried residue clings to its interior. Likely, it was used earlier in the season to steep a warm drink. You picture the family passing the cup, each sipping, letting the heat spread through their chests. Kneeling beside the hearth, you run your fingers through the ash. A faint ember glows beneath, a reminder that hot water is a luxury tonight. Yet even lukewarm infusions carried meaning. Preparing the herbs offered a sense of control, a small ritual against the cold. A thought drifts through your mind, one that historians often explore when studying herbal traditions: how much of winter herb knowledge came from necessity, and how much from older beliefs passed down through rural folklore. Evidence suggests families learned through both observation and storytelling. Some herbs were chosen because they genuinely eased discomfort, while others were trusted simply because parents and grandparents believed their presence protected sleep. You turn again to study the shelf. A small wooden mortar sits nearby, its bowl stained green from years of crushing leaves. The pestle rests inside, its handle smooth from countless hands. You imagine a parent grinding herbs in the quiet moments between sleeps, the rhythmic scrape blending with the nighttime hush. Running your fingertips along the rim, you feel the cool, solid tool that has helped countless nights ease into rest. In this world, practical knowledge grew alongside superstition, forming a tapestry where plants carried both physical and emotional power. You glance back at the sleeping family. The children lie curled together, breathing softly, with a faint herbal scent drifting from their blankets. Perhaps someone rubbed crushed leaves on the cloth earlier, hoping the fragrance would help them sleep more peacefully through the storm. A mother's touch, a father's caution, simple acts woven into the rhythm of winter survival. You move slowly toward the door and pause. Above the frame hangs a small bundle of herbs, faintly bitter in scent. Many families placed plants near doorways or windows, believing they discouraged illness or wandering spirits during the cold season. Whether practical or symbolic, these beliefs offered comfort, soothing anxious hearts during long nights. You inhale deeply, letting the blend of earthy, sweet, and slightly medicinal scents fill your lungs. Winter survival was never only about heat and food, it was also about comfort, shaped by simple ingredients gathered in gentler seasons. These herbs carried memories of sunlight, warm breezes, and green landscapes hidden beneath snow. Returning to the hearth, you settle on the floor. The ember glows softly, the herbs giving the air a steady presence. You imagine drifting into a second sleep with these scents around you, wrapped in blankets while the storm whispers outside. The cottage feels less like a fortress and more like a sanctuary, a place where warmth is shared, storms endure together, and plants harvested long ago still hold quiet magic to guide weary bodies into rest. You close your eyes briefly. The cold lingers at the edges of the room, but the herbs soften it. The sleeping family's warmth steadies it, and the ember keeps it at bay. In this balance, sleep finds its way through the deepest winter night. Resting your palm on the floorboards, you feel the faint heat seep into your skin and notice another quiet truth of medieval winters. Illness was ever present. Not always severe, not always fatal, but constant in the shadows of cold rooms and long nights. Rising slowly, you glance at the children. One shifts slightly, a soft sniffle escaping from under the blankets. Their nose is chilled, their throat dry from the cold air. A simple cough could easily settle into a household like this. The air is damp, the cold persistent. Villagers spent hours inhaling smoke from low fires, wrapped in wool that held both warmth and moisture. Illness was woven into winter life. You walk to a corner where a basket of dried roots and cloth strips rests. These are not luxury medicines but the humble tools of families caring for themselves. Kneeling, you lift a piece of cloth, faintly scented with vinegar and dried berries. People often soaked cloths in simple infusions to place on the foreheads of those with fevers. You imagine a mother dipping it into warm water from the hearth, wringing it out carefully, and pressing it gently onto a child's skin. You pick up a dried root, brittle and twisted, the color of old earth. Some roots eased sore throats or settled upset stomachs. Others were chewed to keep coughs at bay. Knowledge like this was passed down through memory, not written records. In some communities, families believed placing a root beneath a pillow invited protective forces to guard the sleeper's breath. Whether believed fully or not, it offered comfort during illness. You imagine such a root tucked near a child's shoulder. You stand and return to the hearth. The ember glows a tired orange beneath ash. Winter nights depended on this fragile warmth. When illness struck, the hearth became the center of care. Warm water, soft cloths, heated stones wrapped in wool, all from the few glowing coals that survived until morning. Without them, sickness would have drained the family more deeply. Moving to the trapdoor, you lift it slightly. Warm air rises from below, the animals breathing steadily in the darkness. Their warmth mattered when someone was ill upstairs. A warmer floor prevented dangerous chills at night. Lowering the trapdoor, you feel the heat settle back into the boards. A question comes to mind, one scholars often ask when examining medieval health practices: how much healing knowledge came from observation, and how much from inherited beliefs shaped by older customs. Some argue families relied on practical remedies discovered through trial and error. Others note the spiritual or symbolic protections woven into nightly routines. The truth seems to be a blend of both. You kneel beside the bedding. The mother sleeps lightly, her breathing soft and steady. Her hand remains near the children, ready to sense a feverish flush or shiver beneath the blankets. In homes like this, caretaking never truly stopped, even in sleep. Parents woke instantly at the slightest noise, alert to the vulnerable bodies resting beside them. A soft cough emerges from beneath the blankets. You lift your head and listen. Though quiet, the sound carries a familiar urgency. You imagine how easily such a cough could worsen in a cold room. The mother might wake, reach for a cloth, or press a warm stone against the child, whispering soothing words as she settles them again. Nights like this held more tension than the calm surface suggested. You rise slowly and move toward the door. The draft slipping beneath it feels sharper now, brushing across the floor like a cold hand. You place your foot against the seam, imagining someone stuffing cloth or straw to block the chill from reaching a sick sleeper. The effort is small, yet in this world, small acts often carried great significance. Your gaze falls on a clay cup near the hearth. Dried residue inside hints at herbs once steeped there. Families often prepared mild infusions for the sick, hoping the warmth would soothe chests or ease tight breathing. You imagine holding such a cup in the quiet hours between first and second sleep, steam brushing your face. Returning to the hearth, you sit cross-legged as the embers pulse faintly around you. The room settles into the second half of night. The storm outside softens to a distant sigh. Animals below shift quietly. The air blends herbal scents, wool, and the faint sharpness of cooling ash. You close your eyes and imagine being sick in this world. No doctor, no hot bath, no steady heat, just family care, shared warmth, and slow healing guided by roots, herbs, and patience. Humility washes over you. Opening your eyes, you notice the children breathing evenly, the mother remaining protective. The house hums with fragile calm. Illness may visit here, but so does care, tenderness, and quiet determination to endure each night. Listening to steady breaths and the storm's faint retreat, you realize winter sickness shaped more than bodies. It shaped rituals, communities, sleep, and the tender ways families watched over each other in the coldest hours. You let the quiet settle, then shift your gaze toward the door. The storm has eased, But another thought arises, shaped by countless footsteps crossing frozen landscapes long after sunset. Not everyone slept through the night inside a warm cottage. Many traveled, wandered, or found themselves far from home with only darkness, cold, and hope. Rising slowly, you imagine facing the winter road alone. You move closer to the door, resting your hand flat against the wood. Cold, yet inviting, it seems to carry memories of hands once knocking, seeking shelter. Winter travel was difficult, muddy, icy, or snow-covered roads, but people still moved between villages for trade, work, religious duties, or survival. Easing the door open, you peer outside. Snow lies thick and unbroken. The night sky glows faintly with reflected white, but the cold beyond feels sharp, almost metallic. You inhale quietly, letting the air sting your throat. You imagine walking through this landscape with only a cloak, thin boots, and a small bundle. Each step would echo through the empty world. You picture a traveler, breath forming pale clouds, shoulders shaking from cold, fingers gripping a satchel tightly. They might have started before dawn or after dusk, aiming for the next village before night deepened. Some carried herbs or dried berries for warmth. Others relied on layers of wool and rough fabric against the wind. Stepping fully outside, you let the cold cling to your skin. A soft wind stirs the snow into tiny spirals. You picture someone moving alone in ghostly light. Each gust bites their cheeks, feet grow numb, and the mind drifts between wakefulness and exhaustion. Shelter becomes everything. Turning back to the cottage, you imagine its warmth as a beacon. Yet not all travelers were so fortunate. Some slept wherever they could, barns, sheds, shallow caves, or even haystacks burrowed into for shelter. Rural tradition recalls farmhands sleeping inside empty grain sacks, awkward but surprisingly warm, curling inside with breath fogging the rough fabric. You step back inside and close the door gently. The warmth feels like a soft embrace after the harsh air. Walking toward the trapdoor, you listen to the animals below. A weary traveler might have sought refuge here, sleeping beside horses, cows, or goats. Their warmth could be life-saving, the scent of hay blending with heat to soothe aching limbs. You crouch beside the straw and imagine lying wrapped in a frost-stiff cloak, animals shifting nearby. Barn floors were hard, rough, and damp, but when freezing outdoors was the alternative, even such crude shelter felt miraculous. You picture someone drifting to sleep beside a cow, grateful for its warmth. A question arises: how often did travelers endure nights without proper shelter? Accounts describe people sleeping beneath hedges, inside hollow trees, under wagons, or in small roadside chapels and abandoned huts, finding momentary refuge wherever possible. Evidence suggests travelers adapted to their surroundings as best they could. You rise and approach the bedding reserved for guests. The extra blanket lies slightly askew, as if waiting for a weary traveler to spread it over the straw. Your hand brushes the cloth, and you imagine the relief of sinking into its warmth after a long, freezing journey. In moments like these, a traveler's gratitude must have been overwhelming. Safety, warmth, the soft murmur of sleeping voices, and the gentle scent of wool and herbs, all forming a refuge from the empty roads left behind. You picture a traveler lying awake for a moment, listening to the quiet breathing of a family they have never met. Perhaps they whispered a soft thank you, maybe a brief prayer of gratitude, or perhaps exhaustion claimed them immediately, surrendering their body to the cold at last. Kneeling, you touch the floor. The boards feel warmer than before, shaped by heat rising from below. You imagine a traveler discovering this, realizing the animals beneath the cottage unknowingly contributed warmth, inspiring gratitude not just for the family, but for the creatures who shared their comfort. Rising again, you face the door. The wood stands solid, holding back the cold. You picture countless hands knocking on doors like this through history, seeking shelter after miles of lonely walking. Some were welcomed, others found barns, and some found nothing at all. Winter travel was a trial few completed without scars. Closing your eyes, you imagine slipping into deep sleep after such a journey, the blanket's warmth, the soft straw beneath, the scent of herbs, and the steady breathing of humans and animals blending into a rare sense of safety. You inhale deeply, letting this imagined comfort settle over you. Outside, the night remains cold and vast, but inside, travelers find a place where weary bones rest, breath eases, and darkness loses its edge. Quietly, you stand by the door, letting the image fade, then turn toward a different kind of winter sleeper. Not a peasant or wanderer, but someone whose nights are far quieter, far colder. You move slowly across the room, imagining stone walls instead of wood, echoing chambers instead of low ceilings, a life shaped by prayer, discipline, and cold that penetrates the soul as well as the body. You step into a monastic cell in your mind. Closing your eyes, you see a narrow stone room with a single slit of a window, a wooden bench, a thin straw mattress, a neatly folded wool blanket at the foot, and a small table holding a stub of candle. No hearth, no fire, just stillness so complete even your breath seems loud. Opening your eyes, you take a slow breath. The cottage fades as the imagined stone walls rise. You reach out, brushing the wooden wall and picturing it as cold stone. The chill seeps through instantly. Monastic cells were deliberately unheated. Heat was a worldly comfort that could distract from devotion. Many communities believed enduring cold strengthened discipline, sharpened prayer, and reminded the body of its place beneath the heavens. You picture a monk cross-legged on a straw pallet, wrapped in a wool habit, hands tucked into long sleeves. The fabric is rough, thick, and heavy with years of use. The smell of old wool, faint incense, and cold air clings to everything. You imagine the monk's breath forming clouds in the dim light as he murmurs prayers before lying down. Some monasteries required sleeping on hard wooden boards to humble the mind. Others allowed straw pallets, but nothing soft. Blankets were scarce, often shared or rotated. You imagine someone pulling a thin blanket tight, exhaling as the fabric fails to block the icy air. Walking toward the imagined window, you touch the cold stone sill. Dawn would creep in as faintly as in the cottage, but here the cold sinks deeper, heavier, into the joints. You imagine waking before sunrise to the small bell ringing through the silent cloister. Even on freezing mornings, monks rose for prayer, washed with icy water, and stepped into dimly lit hallways. A question arises: did monks embrace the cold willingly, or merely accept it as a required discipline? Some writings describe it as a test of devotion, others hint at private struggles, revealing dread alongside faith. Evidence varies, showing that faith and discomfort coexisted in ways both inspiring and human. Kneeling beside the cottage hearth, you let the flames vanish in your mind as the stone floor grows colder. You imagine the monk's nightly routine, a brief prayer, a whispered plea for strength, slowly settling onto the palate, aware warmth would never fully arrive. You picture lying on your side, knees drawn close, pulling the blanket tight, hoping your breath warms a small pocket of air. Then comes true silence, pressing so close that your heartbeat seems to echo in your skull. In monasteries, silence was a rule, a discipline, a path to contemplation. Nights passed without whispers, children, or animals. Only distant groans or footsteps broke the stillness. Walking toward the cottage trapdoor, you pause. Warm air rises from the animals below, but in a monastic cell, no comfort exists. No cows shifting in sleep, no goats snorting softly, only stone holding cold stubbornly. You imagine how different sleep feels without shared warmth. Rest becomes thinner, lighter, broken into intervals rather than deep, continuous sleep. You turn back to the cottage bedding, drawn like a gentle fire. Kneeling, you imagine the contrast. A monk sleeps alone, wrapped in solitude as tightly as the rough wool of a habit. Even in dormitories, the silence between beds feels immense. You imagine rows of straw pallets beneath a stone ceiling, each man lying in his own pocket of cold air, the silence so deep it feels almost liquid. A small detail from monastic life emerges as you lower your hand to the blankets. In some monasteries, monks shared warmth only on the coldest nights, drawing their pallets closer together despite strict rules. Letters from certain abbots describe these nights with quiet honesty. Whispers exchanged in the dark carried prayers for endurance and the rare comfort of proximity to another human body. It was uncommon, yet real. You rise slowly and step back into the center of the cottage. The air here feels warmer, almost generous compared to the imagined monastic cell. A quiet sense of gratitude stirs inside you. Even this humble home, with its drafts and dim embers, feels luxurious compared to stone rooms where monks surrendered warmth to pursue spiritual focus. You close your eyes and picture lying on the cold floor, wrapped in a thin blanket, your breath fogging the air above your face, waiting for sleep to arrive. Perhaps your stomach murmurs. Perhaps your fingers ache. Yet your mind centers on prayer, discipline, and the rhythm of the cloister. You imagine drifting into fragile sleep, waking before dawn to another day of devotion and cold. Opening your eyes, the cottage greets you with soft, crackling ash, gentle warmth, and the breathing of a family. The contrast between these worlds sharpens your understanding. Here, sleep is shaped by survival. In a monastery, it is shaped by purpose. Standing quietly, wrapped in the cottage's warmth, you grasp something simple and profound. No matter the walls, people find ways to rest, through winter, devotion, closeness, or endurance. Each world offers its own warmth, its own path to sleep. Your thoughts shift again, drifting away from the stone of monastic cells toward a different kind of winter night, one with more blankets, thicker walls, higher ceilings, and heavier meals. You step slowly across the room, imagining doors opening into manor halls lit by tallow candles, long corridors lined with tapestries, and beds far larger than any peasant could dream of. You enter an aristocrat's winter chamber. You breathe in and picture a large wooden room scented faintly with beeswax and dried lavender. Thick curtains cover narrow windows, trapping heat. Carpets soften footsteps and shield against drafts. A canopied bed rests against the far wall, layered with furs, wool blankets, and embroidered quilts. It appears luxurious, almost decadent compared to the straw pallets of the cottage. Yet even in manor houses, warmth was a challenge, especially when icy winds seeped through cracks in old stone. You move closer to the grand bed, boots muffled by thick rugs. Pulling back the canopy, your hand brushes the fur, soft, warm, carrying a subtle scent of animals, fox, sheep, or something rarer. Aristocrats had access to materials peasants never touched: furs, imported blankets, dyed fabrics, fine threads. Yet even here, the cold lingered. You imagine the noble sleeper curling beneath these layers, breath fogging faintly in the chill. Household records note that warming pans filled with glowing coals were sometimes slid under the sheets to provide temporary heat. Even then, the warmth vanished quickly, swallowed by the vast room. You picture a servant quietly leaving after tending the fire, leaving the noble to settle into a fleeting pocket of comfort. Surrounded by richness, you still imagine a faint shiver as the cold seeps into corners. Nobility could afford thicker walls and more fuel, but winter spared no one. Large rooms remained drafty, corridors icy, and high ceilings let warmth drift upward too quickly. Candles flickered in the cold air, a subtle reminder that comfort could slip away even in grandeur. Another aspect of aristocratic nights comes to mind. Servants often slept nearby, sometimes on temporary bedding at the foot of the lord's bed. They added wood to the fire, brought extra blankets, and responded to late-night needs. Their presence meant noble sleepers rarely woke completely alone. You imagine a servant dozing lightly, ready to rise at the faintest call. A thought arises: did aristocrats truly sleep more comfortably than peasants? Vast rooms made warmth harder to retain, yet access to finer materials and extra layers offered some relief. Both views hold truth, highlighting the striking contrast between luxury and discomfort. You pause near the imagined window. Heavy curtains block the cold, but you can almost feel frost thickening on the glass. Servants often stuffed wool or straw into gaps to keep the wind out. Winter defeated tapestries, rugs, and drapes just as it slipped through peasant walls. You step back, picturing the quiet inside the aristocratic chamber. No storm rattling thin walls, no animal sounds below, only the occasional pop of a generous fire. Noble households had access to whole carts of wood, yet even these fires struggled to heat massive rooms. You return your attention to the bed, imagining the sleeper adjusting layers, pulling furs closer, clothed in fine linen or soft woolen nightwear far superior to peasant garments. You imagine the silk against your skin, warm at first, gradually cooling as the night stretches on. A faint trace of folklore rises as you pace. In some households, polished stones were placed under the pillows of noble children, thought to absorb excess cold and shield them from winter's chill. Whether this was superstition or practical observation, it lingered in fragments of household tradition. You picture lifting such a stone, now cool and weighty in your hand. You kneel beside the imagined hearth of a manor, sensing the echo of its warmth. The flames would burn more confidently here than in a peasant home. Yet fireplaces, often built more for show than efficiency, let much heat escape upward. The noble sleeper relied on layers of bedding as much as the fire itself. You realize that no amount of luxury could fully conquer winter nights. You rise, letting the scene fade, replaced by the warm, shadowed cottage around you. The contrast deepens your understanding. Wealth shaped beds, blankets, and servants, but cold shaped everything else. It erased comfort differences faster than many realize. You breathe slowly, feeling the rough cottage floor beneath your feet, imagining the noble sleeper wrapped in furs beneath heavy quilts in a drafty chamber. Their breath fogged faintly above the pillow, just as it does here. Different worlds, different materials, but the same winter pressing in. Standing in the dim cottage warmth, you understand clearly, winter humbled everyone. Peasant, monk, traveler, or aristocrat. Comfort varied, but cold reached every bed. Another presence drifts into your thoughts, heavier than the winter wind or long nights: hunger. Not the slow ache of a modest winter, but the harsh kind that strikes when crops fail, herds thin, and snow falls early and relentless. You look at the family sleeping on their straw pallet, breathing softly and peacefully, yet you know there were winters when sleep did not come so gently. You move toward the wooden chest by the wall, lifting its lid slowly, imagining the hollow emptiness felt when a family's stores ran low. In lean years, that emptiness becomes a permanent houseguest. Whole villages shared the quiet dread when harvests failed. Inside, a few dried beans, a handful of barley, suddenly treasures. You let the lid fall softly, feeling the weight of dwindling supplies long before spring. Crouching by the hearth again, you sense only a tiny glow, no true warmth. In famine winters, families often allowed fires to die early to save fuel, choosing darkness over hunger. You sift through ash, watching small flecks dance in dim light, imagining someone months into a harsh winter, stomach tight, wondering if the ember will suffice to cook even the smallest meal. A fragment of old village wisdom touches your thoughts. People sometimes hung an extra wooden spoon on the wall during famine, leaving it untouched as a wish for better days. You glance at the wall, half expecting to see one. Perhaps the family kept such a symbol for harsher seasons. The children sleep warmly tonight, but in desperate winters, families wrap them tightly in blankets, restricting movement to preserve heat. Parents often gave their portions to children, eating little themselves. You sit beside the pallet, imagining lying with a growling, empty stomach blending with the creaks of the house. A quiet question arises: how did famine alter nightly routines? Some studies suggest families went to bed earlier to escape hunger through sleep. Others propose hunger kept minds awake, wandering through anxious thoughts. The truth likely varied by household. You glance at the ember, imagining the room filled not with warmth but with soft whimpers of discomfort. You rise, touching the cold wooden door, picturing winters so harsh that villagers opened doors not to welcome guests but to trade their last scraps. Snow piled high blocked pathways, isolating families from neighboring farms. Moving toward the storage corner, you picture a small bowl of water left to freeze. Harder ice meant greater fear. Prolonged cold spoiled food, froze water, and weakened livestock. Kneeling, you feel the chill spreading through the room. Animals stir below. Their faint warmth reaches you, but your mind turns to darker choices. In severe winters, families often chose between feeding animals or themselves. Losing livestock meant losing hope for spring recovery. Standing again, you imagine the family sleeping in a circle, bodies pressed together for warmth and comfort. Hunger twists thoughts, making dreams vivid and strange, feasts of warm bread, sunlight glinting on fruit. Famine dreams were often painfully realistic, leaving sleepers in tears upon waking. You rest your palm on the blankets, imagining them covering thin limbs, ribs showing beneath worn shirts. Clothing could loosen in weeks, belts required constant tightening. Fingers fumble with knots weakened by hunger. A fragment of rural folklore resurfaces. In some villages, a crust of bread was left on the windowsill during famine as a symbolic offering, a hope for protection or change in fortune. The crust often hardened within hours, yet it offered families a small comfort when worry grew heavy. You turn to the window and picture the faint silhouette of such a crust resting on the sill. Moving back to the hearth, you sit once more. The ember glows faintly, a reminder that life endures even in weakness. During famine winters, families clung to that single ember just as they held tightly to each other. You close your eyes briefly, imagining yourself in that household. You might wake repeatedly, not from cold, but from the steady ache of an empty stomach. You might curl closer to a loved one, seeking warmth and reassurance amidst quiet fear. Opening your eyes slowly, you notice the cottage tonight is calm. The family sleeps peacefully. Outside, the snow lies silent. Yet, the memory of harsh winters lingers like a shadow across the room, reminding you that survival demanded more than warmth. It required enduring hunger with courage, sharing what little remained, and holding on to hope when nearly nothing else persisted. You inhale softly, letting the scene settle. The ember glows, blankets rise and fall, and the house retains its fragile warmth. Even in the harshest winters, people found ways to sleep, to dream, and to meet the coming day, not through abundance, but through perseverance, grounded in love and shared strength. You remain near the hearth, allowing the quiet hum of the room to soften your thoughts. The family sleeps. The ember glows dimly, and the storm outside begins to ease. Then a subtle change touches the air. It is not warmth yet, but something gentler, a whisper of possibility. You rise and move toward the shuttered window, sensing the stillness of the night tilt toward promise. In the hardest weeks of winter, even a small hint of seasonal change carries weight. Placing your fingertips on the shutter, you feel the wood, cold, but less biting than before. A softer note in the wind draws your attention. You lean closer. The air moves differently now, gentler. Villagers often noticed these shifts long before spring arrived, attuned to nature's smallest gestures. A softer breeze, a subtle change in the night silence, a snowdrift settling with a whisper rather than a crack. These signs offered hope. You step back and breathe slowly. The atmosphere inside the cottage feels subtly altered. Smoke from the ember curls less heavily, and the cold, though present, is milder. You imagine families on nights like this, exchanging quiet glances, whispering that the worst might soon be behind them. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. A memory of rural tradition rises. In some regions, people believed the earth sighed in the last weeks of winter, releasing a soft breath signaling spring's approach. Frost spirits, they said, began to lose their strength. Whether true or not, the belief makes sense. The air shifts so subtly it feels as if the world itself is awakening. You move toward the bedding and kneel beside the children. Their breathing is steady and warm, bodies curled peacefully beneath the blankets. You picture the mother sensing the morning air, noticing her breath fogs less intensely. These details mattered deeply to families living winter day by day. A softer breeze might spark conversations about preparing tools for early planting or checking stored seeds. Hope requires little space to grow. Standing, you walk toward the corner where dried herbs hang from the rafters. Touching one, its crisp leaves crumble slightly beneath your fingers. In some households, small portions of herbs were burned when the air shifted this way, believed to honor winter's end. The rising scent reminded families of warmer months, even if briefly. You move toward the door and crouch to feel the draft beneath it. Cold remains, but the edge is gentler. You imagine a father pressing his hand to the same spot, whispering hope to himself. After months of harsh cold, even a hint of softness feels like a gift. A thought forms. Did people consciously track these subtle shifts, or did instinct guide them? Some records describe careful observation of frost and sky, while others suggest intuition shaped by experience. Likely, the truth lies between the two. Without calendars or forecasts, nature itself became the clock. Returning to the window, you lift the shutter just enough to peek outside. The sky hints at dawn, a pale glow behind distant clouds. You exhale. The snow surface looks smoother, glistening faintly. The wind, too, is calmer, slipping gently across the drifts. Stepping outside briefly, the cold wraps around you differently, softer beneath its bite. A droplet clings to the edge of a roof beam, trembling as if unsure whether to fall. In deep winter, everything freezes solid. One droplet suggests change. You touch it lightly. Cold, yet undeniably liquid. Stepping back inside, you close the door quietly. That single droplet lingers in your thoughts. A whisper, a hint of the world thawing beneath ice. Returning to the hearth, you sit, letting your weight sink into the straw-covered floor. The ember glows faintly, perhaps brighter than before. Maybe it's imagination, maybe not. The house breathes gently. You sense the season's unseen wheels beginning to turn. Looking at the sleeping family, you consider what this shift means to them. The hardest nights fading, the promise of longer days, the chance of warmer winds, and the first stirring of soil beneath the snow. Tonight, their dreams may reflect subtle change, images of flowing water, fields beginning to sprout, or sunlight touching bare earth. You close your eyes and let the moment rest within you. Hope grows quietly during winter, often unnoticed, almost imperceptible. Yet when it appears, even softly, it settles deep in the mind. The night continues. The cold still lingers in the room, but the air carries a hint of something new. You feel it as clearly as the warmth beneath your fingertips. The first whispers of spring drift through the frozen world. You remain by the hearth, holding that small promise of change, then lift your gaze toward the dim ceiling. This is the final stretch of winter, the last long night before the world slowly warms again. It is not dramatic. No bird song or sunlight heralds it. Instead, it settles gently over the cottage, like a long exhale drawn from the season itself. You rise, sensing the floor's chill even as the air softens around you. Moving toward the shuttered window, the wood is still cold beneath your fingers, but the night feels slightly loosened. The draft enters as usual, yet less sharply, as though winter is growing weary. Resting your forehead lightly against the shutter, your breath warms a small patch of wood. Outside, the sound has shifted. The wind no longer hums with the tight, crystalline tone of deep frost. It drifts lazily now, like a creature near the end of its strength. You step back and glance at the sleeping family. Their breathing remains steady, warm, and rhythmic, filling the cottage with gentle music. Kneeling beside them, you watch the blankets rise and fall together, limbs arranged in comfort that only comes with trust. Perhaps they sense the changing season without realizing it. Sometimes the body knows before the mind. A quiet thought settles. In the final weeks of winter, villagers often spoke of a stillness at night, not frightening but patient. A pause before the world expands again. You imagine stepping outside in the early morning to hear sounds absent for months. Water dripping, snow softening, ice loosening from branches, the faint crack of thawing earth. These would signal that endurance is paying off. By the hearth, you crouch beside the embers. A faint glow shimmers beneath the ash, like a slow heartbeat. Stirring it gently, a spark brightens and settles again. The ember seems stubborn, unwilling to die. In many homes, the last nights of winter feel heavy yet hopeful. Fuel is guarded carefully, anticipating warmer days. A small piece of tradition comes to mind. Some villagers believed that on the last long night, the spirit of winter silently passed through each home to see who survived. If it found a warm bed, a glowing ember, or a peacefully sleeping child, it moved on satisfied. Such stories soften the harshness of the season, giving its departure a gentle presence. You imagine winter pausing at this door, seeing the family safe, and slipping away without malice. You rise and approach the door. The draft beneath it feels different now, less hungry, less sharp. Resting your hand on the frame, you imagine the days ahead when this door will open to air smelling of wet soil, not frozen earth. The family will step outside not hunched against the cold, but with light on their faces as the world begins to thaw. A question drifts through your mind. One researchers ponder about seasonal traditions. Did villagers consciously mark the last long night, or did they simply feel it in their bones? Evidence suggests both. Some households noted the timing and performed small acts of gratitude. Others sensed the shift naturally, without formal acknowledgement. Returning to the center of the room, your eyes adjust to the dimness. Every corner is familiar: the rough walls, hanging herbs, straw-filled seams, bundled children, the faint gleam of a clay pot, the trembling shutter. You feel connected, as if walking through memory rather than a dwelling. Kneeling again beside the bedding, your palm rests lightly on the blanket. The warmth beneath your hand feels deeper now, reflecting not just survival, but anticipation. You imagine the mother waking soon, sensing the air, whispering that winter loosens and the sun lingers a little longer. A muffled sigh rises from the animals below, followed by a soft shuffle in the hay. Even they seem to sense the change, moving less tensely, breathing lighter. Later, the father may find the animals calmer, stamping their hooves with renewed energy, eager for the coming thaw. You sit back quietly, letting all impressions settle: the room, the family, the night, the season. Everything gathers in soft harmony. The final long night is not triumph, but relief, a humble recognition that cold cannot last forever. You take a slow breath. The air tastes cleaner, softer, filled with subtle promise. This night, quiet as it is, marks an ending. Not sudden, not harsh, but gentle, like snow melting under morning light. Soon the world will brighten. The fields will stir. The family will sleep with less fear in their bones. You settle by the hearth again, letting your body relax into the gentle darkness. The ember murmurs beneath the ash, a reminder that warmth persists even in stillness. The air softens, the storm fades. Silence allows your thoughts to drift slowly, calmly, like snowflakes settling on untouched ground. You breathe in the scent of wool, dried herbs, and cooling straw. Every sound becomes softer: the timbers creak, the child's exhale, even the animals rustle, merging into a soothing hush. Everything slows. Everything softens. You picture the cottage from above, a circle of warmth in a vast, quiet landscape. Dim light, sleeping family, your presence at their side, winter's final stretch easing its hold. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your breath slow. Let your mind wander. The cold outside can wait. Soon the world will thaw. Tonight, nothing demands attention: not wind, not darkness, not long months past. Only quiet, warmth, and the soft understanding that winter nights, no matter how deep, always move toward dawn. Let that thought settle, glowing slowly like an ember that refuses to fade. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your mind float. You are safe here, wrapped in calm, preparing to wake. Sweet dreams.